Chapter 3353. Although Yank was like a puppet, his life was in Ji Tianxing's hands. In order to survive, he could only accept reality and obey Ji Tianxing's orders. However, he had his own thoughts and consciousness, and he did not agree with Cao Qingyu's words. He used my life as a hostage to force me to obey him. How can I be grateful to him? Cao Qingyu, you're the one who lost your mind. Do you think everyone else is the same as you? Yank stared at Cao Qingyu and sneered contemptuously. Cao Qingyu did not argue with him. He smiled and shook his head. Is your brain made of stone? You can't think straight. I don't want to waste my time talking to you. You'll understand my words in the future. If you don't believe me, just wait and see. Humph. Yank snorted. He did not want to waste any more words with him. Ji Tianxing said, Yank, whether you accept it or not, you have to accept reality and serve me. Since you've already greeted each other, let's work together in the future. It'll be good for everyone. Cao Qingyu quickly nodded. Yank was very reluctant, but he could only nod. Ji Tianxing did not say anything else. He looked out the window and asked Cao Qingyu, have we entered the Golden Dragon domain? Where are we now? Cao Qingyu quickly reported, young master, we entered the Golden Dragon domain 10 days ago. We're now in the Gari Yi Empire. We'll reach the Gari Yi Empire's imperial city in 6 hours. Hearing this, Ji Tianxing slightly nodded, that's good. We'll stop at the Gari Yi Empire's imperial city and try to find out more information about the Golden Dragon Abyss. Cao Qingyu nodded to show that he understood. Ji Tianxing and Yank stood in the cockpit and waited patiently. 6 hours passed quickly. It was now noon, and the sun was high in the sky. On the green grassland in front of the divine warship, a majestic capital city that spanned a radius of 1,000 miles appeared. The city was situated on a flat grassland, with a majestic mountain range behind it and a vast forest on both sides. In front of the city was a huge lake, like a mirror embedded in the grassland. 2 huge dragon-like rivers flowed through the city. Under the scorching sun, the palaces and buildings in the city reflected a dazzling golden light. The large lake and the 2 large rivers were also like pearls and jade belts, overflowing with light and color. The divine ship descended from the sky and slowly landed outside the northern gate of the imperial city. The towering 300 tall city wall was completely built with special divine stones. After experiencing thousands of years of wind and rain, it had long since been eroded by wind and frost. Under the towering vermilion city gate, there were over 100 armored city guards holding swords. The Protoss commoners who came and went had to undergo inspection and pay a certain amount of divine stones. Ji Tianxing, Cao Qingyu, and Yank appeared on the bluestone road outside the northern gate, and did not attract much attention. After all, the imperial city was the core of the entire Gari Yi Empire, and more than 8 million people lived here. The 4 city gates in the north, south, east, and west were open day and night, and more than 100,000 people entered and exited every day. It was very common for a noble young master to be dressed like Ji Tianxing, with a butler and guards. If there was anything different, it was that Ji Tianxing and Yank's appearances were too eye-catching in the crowd. Ji Tianxing was a human, which was extremely rare in the Gari Yi Empire. Yank was 30 meters tall, like a giant made of stone, and also had a shocking and oppressive aura. However, the commoners of the imperial city were very knowledgeable, and they only took a few glances at Ji Tianxing and Yank, and they were used to it. The 3 of them arrived at the city gate, and the city guards did a routine inspection, but did not find anything out of the ordinary. After all, the 3 of them were divine king experts. They concealed their auras, and no one could find anything out of the ordinary. Cao Qingyu took out a bag of divine stones and handed it to the city guards, and showed 3 identity tokens, and they were allowed to enter the imperial city. After entering the imperial city, the 3 of them walked along the main road, and walked into the city at a leisurely pace. As they observed the surrounding scenery, the 3 of them secretly released their divine senses, enveloping the entire imperial city, and began to scout for information. Young master, we have already scouted, and there are no divine king experts in the entire imperial city. There are more than a dozen peak divine lords, and most of them are in the imperial city. There are about 100 high-level divine lords, and they are scattered all over the imperial city. Young master, the imperial city is in the northern part of the city, and there are many residences of high officials and nobles nearby. There are also two powerful sects. There are two factions in the southern part of the city, and they both collect and sell information, and they seem to have a wide range of customers. There is a faction in the northern part of the city that is very hidden, and they should be there to scout for information, and very few people come in and out. However, I have already scouted out that this faction has even more experts. In a short hour, the three of them had not even walked to the center of the city, and they already had a rough understanding of the imperial city's situation. Divine King experts like them, their divine senses could envelop a radius of 40,000 to 50,000 miles, let alone a mere imperial city. Under the envelopment of their divine senses, the several 100,000 houses and buildings in the imperial city, and the 8 million plus commoners, all could not escape their probing. Even the secret tunnels, secret rooms, and underground palaces hidden underground, the three of them could also investigate clearly. Adding on the three of them's experience, they could quickly determine which places were the ones they were looking for. Ji Tianxing thought for a moment, opened his mouth, and said, "The two factions in the southern part of the city that sell information do business with many divine races, and their information is messy and low-end. Rather, the hidden faction in the northern part of the city has a deeper foundation, and the information they have is also more high-level and confidential. Let's go to that faction and ask. If we don't gain anything, we can go directly to the imperial city to inquire, and we will definitely get the answer." Yank frowned slightly and suggested, "Young master, why go through so much trouble? Let's go directly to the imperial city, capture the emperor, and interrogate him. Won't we know everything then? Anyway, with our strength, we can do whatever we want on the continent. What's there to be afraid of?" Before Ji Tianxing could speak, Chao Qingyu frowned and retorted, "Yank, you are too murderous. You always want to use violence to solve problems. We are just asking for information. Is there a need to make such a big fuss? Of course, young master is not afraid of trouble, but it's better to avoid trouble. If we really capture Emperor Gari Yi for interrogation, it will cause a big disturbance. Won't it be a waste of time? Chimpage." Yank snorted coldly and did not refute. The three of them entered stealth mode and teleported to the northern part of the city, and appeared in an ancient manor. This manor was very quiet, and seemed to be empty. However, the three of them had already seen through the disguise of this manor with their divine senses. Ji Tianxing walked to the bottom of a rockery, raised his hand, and shot out a beam of golden light, which destroyed the defensive formation that enveloped the rockery. Bang! After a muffled sound, a door of light appeared. He was the first to step into the door of light, and Chao Qingyu and Yank hurriedly followed. The three of them maintained stealth mode and quietly went underground. Soon, they entered an underground palace. In the dimly lit underground palace, there were more than 30 middle-level divine lord guards guarding the various important passages. In a secret room deep in the underground palace, there were 5 high-level divine lords and peak divine lords gathered together to discuss something. Chapter 3354. There were more than 30 middle-level divine lords in the underground palace, hiding in the darkness and guarding the palace. However, Ji Tianxing and the other two concealed their figures and auras, and stepped into the underground palace openly as if they were entering an uninhabited area. They did not attract the attention of the guards and headed toward the secret room in the depths of the underground palace. As they approached, the three of them released their divine senses and used their trump cards to eavesdrop on the conversation of the 5 people in the secret room. The secret room was not big, only 100 feet wide, but it was built very firmly and had a large number of defensive divine arrays. To a divine lord realm powerhouse, that secret room was considered impervious to wind and rain, impregnable like a fortress. The secret room was dimly lit. Beside an oval-shaped stone table, there were 3 high divine lords and 2 peak divine lords. The person sitting at the head was obviously the leader of this faction. He was a skinny old man dressed in a black robe and a cloak. His voice was low and hoarse. However, he was a peak divine lord and his aura was cold. The other 4 divine lords were wary of him. The 2 high-level divine lords on the left of the stone table were dressed in exquisite and luxurious clothes. They looked dignified and had the aura of a leader. However, the two peak divine lords on the right of the stone table were like absurd and unruly monsters. One of them was dressed in grey linen clothes and wore a bronze mask with fangs. The other was a hunchbacked bald old woman with 4 wings on her back. Not only was she blind in one eye, she also only had 2 yellow teeth left in her mouth. With Ji Tianxing and the other two's experience, they could naturally tell that the 5 divine lords belonged to different factions and they were secretly discussing something important. So, Ji Tianxing was not in a hurry to show himself. He hid in the dark with Chao Qingyu and Yank to eavesdrop on the conversation of the 5 divine lords. At that moment, the cloaked old man in the lead said in a low voice, "Everyone, ever since the incident at the Golden Dragon Abyss, we have been paying close attention to the news. Most of the news that everyone has received is provided by us. Now that half a month has passed, I believe that everyone has thought it through. Are you going or not? I hope you can give me a definite answer tonight." After saying this, he looked at the peak divine lord on the right who was dressed in grey sackcloth and wore a copper mask. He asked, "Flame Devil Gang Master, what do you think?" The Flame Demon Gang leader was wearing a mask, so no one could see the change in his expression. He replied in a low, muffled voice, "President Feng Yin, I have already made my stance clear. The opportunity to explore the Golden Dragon Abyss and hunt for treasures only comes once every 100 years. I will not miss it no matter what. Our gang's elite forces have already been assembled. They are on standby at the 7-mile bridge in the south of the city. They can set off at any time." President Feng Yin nodded in satisfaction. He then looked at the hunchbacked, bald old woman and asked, "Granny Shaw, has your Earth Emanations Alliance considered this carefully?" Granny Evil Spirit grinned, revealing 2 big yellow teeth. Her voice was like an owl as she said, "Of course. Although the incident at the Golden Dragon Abyss had cost the lives of many divine sovereigns, the divine sovereigns were still alive. But the more dangerous it is, the more it proves that a rare treasure has appeared. How can our league not get a share of the profits?" Seeing that Granny Shaw had agreed, President Feng Yin looked at the 2 high celestial lords on the left and asked, "Envoys, what are the plans of the Odd Lord Hall and the Wind Tower?" The 2 high celestial lords were envoys sent by the 2 factions to discuss important matters. They were high-ranking people in their respective factions and held important positions like elders and branch lords. The 2 exchanged a look and pondered for a moment before nodding in agreement. As the saying goes, riches and honor are found in danger. Since all of you are so ambitious, the Odd Lord Hall cannot be a burden. Let's do it. Although the Wind Tower has been living in seclusion for the past few hundred years, its talents have withered, and its financial resources have weakened. If we don't go to the Golden Dragon Abyss and fight, I'm afraid that in another 1,000 years, the Wind Tower will be relegated to a second-tier faction. We can only give it a try. Although the leaders and envoys of the 4 factions had different words and attitudes, they all nodded in agreement. However, they all nodded in agreement. President Feng Yin also revealed a gratified smile. He made the final decision and said, "Since everyone has decided, I will give you a day to prepare. Tomorrow night, we will gather at the south of the city and head to the Golden Dragon Abyss together." The Flame Demon Gang leader, Granny Shaw, the envoys of the Odd Lord Hall, and the envoys of the Wind Tower all nodded in agreement. After the discussion ended, the 4 high celestial lords stood up and left the secret room. When only President Feng Yin was left in the secret room, it became quiet. At the same time, Ji Tianxing, Chao Qingyu, and Yank, who were hiding in the dark, were also secretly communicating with each other. "Young master, isn't this too much of a coincidence? We were just about to ask for information about the Golden Dragon Abyss. Who would have thought that those fellows would be talking about it and preparing to head to the Golden Dragon Abyss tomorrow?" Chao Qingyu frowned. His expression was a little strange, as if he didn't believe it. Yank looked at him expressionlessly and snorted, "Don't tell me you think that those 5 fellows already knew that we were sneaking in and guessed that we were going to ask for information about the Golden Dragon Abyss. So they deliberately talked about the Golden Dragon Abyss to plot against us?" Chao Qingyu quickly shook his head and said angrily, "Nonsense. Those are just 5 high celestial lords. How could they have such great abilities? I just find it strange. From their conversation, the Golden Dragon Abyss doesn't seem to be too hidden. But why have I never heard of the Golden Dragon Abyss? Yank looked askance at him and sneered, ha ha ha. You just returned to the boundless heaven continent this year. How many years have you been away before this? Do you know how many changes have happened in the Golden Dragon domain in those years? There are too many things you don't know. Seeing that the two were about to quarrel again, Ji Tianxing waved his hand and said, both of you, shut up. Let's go find President Feng Yin and ask him. Won't it be clear? After saying that, he led the way to the secret room. Chao Qingyu and Yank stopped arguing and quickly followed. The three of them came to the door of the secret room. Ji Tianxing cast a spell to break the defensive divine array at the door and opened the stone door of the secret room. Yank and Chao Qingyu worked together to cast a spell to cover the light and divine power fluctuations so that they wouldn't be discovered by the guards in the underground palace. The three high celestial lords worked together seamlessly. Ji Tianxing only used 10 breaths of time to break the divine array and open the door of the secret room. Moreover, the entire process didn't leak any divine light or energy fluctuations, so they weren't discovered by the guards. In the secret room, President Feng Yin was still frowning and thinking about what to add for tomorrow's operation. Suddenly, the door of the secret room opened, and 3 figures of different heights stepped into the secret room one after another. Walking at the back was a stone golem that was like a small mountain. In order to squeeze through the small door of the secret room, he had to shrink his body by 10 times. Bang! The door of the secret room closed. An extremely dangerous and heavy aura enveloped President Feng Yin. He sat on the stone bench and didn't dare to act rashly. His eyes were fixed on the 3 uninvited guests, and his gaze focused on the white-robed youth in the lead. The invisible pressure made him full of vigilance. Being too nervous, all the muscles and nerves in his body were taut. Chapter 33:55. There was dead silence in the secret room, and the air seemed to have frozen. After a moment of silence, President Feng Yin suppressed his fear and said calmly, "You all look unfamiliar, I don't seem to know you. I wonder, why did you break into the forbidden area of our association?" Ji Tianxing walked to the front of the stone table and looked down at President Feng Yin with a meaningful smile on his face. "You're not bad. Calm in the face of danger and tactful. Looks like we can talk." Chao Qingyu and Yank stood behind him on his left and right. Both of them stared coldly at President Feng Yin. The pressure on President Feng Yin was even greater. He felt a chill on his back, as if someone was choking him and he would suffocate at any time. He forced a smile and said to Ji Tianxing, "I'm the president of Feng Yin Society, and I'm a businessman. I sell intelligence and confidential information to various experts and forces. Since you're here, you're a guest. If I can help you, I'll be happy. But how should I address you? Why are you here?" Indeed, Feng Yin Society was a businessman. But Feng Yin Society only dealt with top experts and forces, and had always been mysterious and low-key. If it was an ordinary upper divine lord, President Feng Yin would not care at all. However, Ji Tianxing, Chao Qingyu, and Yang Ku were all too mysterious and unfathomable. That was the reason why President Feng Yin treated them courteously. Ji Tianxing went straight to the point and said, "I heard you talking about the Golden Dragon Abyss just now. You seem to be preparing to go tomorrow. Coincidentally, we also want to inquire about the Golden Dragon Abyss. You have to tell us everything about the Golden Dragon Abyss. If I'm satisfied, I'll naturally reward you. If you hide anything, you know the consequences." Just a few sentences, but it contained a lot of information. President Feng Yin's body stiffened when he heard it, and his eyes flashed with deep shock. First of all, he was talking to the people of the 4 major forces in the secret room, and he thought it was very secretive. But Ji Tianxing and the other 2 quietly broke into the underground palace and did not arouse the guards' vigilance. Moreover, they even heard everyone's conversation through the walls and defensive array of the secret room. This was simply too terrifying. President Feng Yin was even more certain that Ji Tianxing and the other 2 were extremely powerful. Most importantly, Ji Tianxing referred to himself as this king. Generally speaking, Only the princes conferred by the imperial family and the honorable divine king experts would address themselves as kings. President Feng Yin believed that Ji Tianxing was the latter. To the present wind-hidden guild, any divine king powerhouse was an existence that they could not afford to provoke. Thinking of this, President Feng Yin's attitude became even more respectful. "Don't worry, young master. This old man will explain the Golden Dragon Abyss to you in detail." After he finished speaking, he stood up and made an inviting gesture, saying, "Young master, please take a seat. This old man will slowly explain everything to you." Ji Tianxing nodded and sat down in an imposing manner. He then calmly looked at President Feng Yin. Chao Qingyu and Yank remained silent. They stood behind Ji Tianxing like two loyal guards. President Feng Yin could only stand. After sorting out his thoughts, he began to explain, "The Golden Dragon Abyss is one of the most famous and dangerous forbidden areas in the Golden Dragon region. This forbidden area appeared 1,100 years ago in the Golden Dragon Empire's territory, in the Endless Forest in the southwest." Hearing this, Chao Qingyu came to a realization and secretly said in his heart, "Yank was right. No wonder I have never heard of the Golden Dragon Abyss. So that's how it is." President Feng Yin continued, 1,100 years ago, a huge abyss suddenly appeared in the depths of the Endless Forest, which was already deserted. It caused panic among the people. There were many legends about the appearance of that abyss in the world. However, there were only two theories with the highest recognition. One was because of the War of the Gods 1,000 years ago. There were many divine kings and divine monarchs fighting in outer space. One of the divine kings and a few divine monarchs under his command died. They fell from the sky like meteors and just happened to land in the Endless Forest. Their divine souls and divine bodies burned, releasing a divine fire that could destroy heaven and earth. It blasted an abyss into the earth and burned the endless rock into magma. The second theory was because of the War of the Gods 1,000 years ago. A divine dragon fell from outer space and smashed into the Endless Forest like a meteor. The earth and rock layers were smashed through, and the Golden Dragon Abyss appeared. It was about 10,000 miles deep and connected to the magma layer underground. Ji Tianxing raised his eyebrows and said in a playful tone, "Interesting. You actually know about the War of the Gods 1,000 years ago? Then why don't you tell this king what happened during that War of the Gods?" President Feng Yin was a little embarrassed and said with a smile, "Young master is joking. Most of the divine monarchs on the continent have heard of the War of the Gods 1,000 years ago. After all, without that War of the Gods, the boundless heaven continent would not have ushered in its first overlord, and there would not be the supreme glory of His Majesty the Azura God Emperor. However, we know very little, and we are not clear about the reasons and results. We definitely do not know better than you. How dare we embarrass ourselves in front of you?" Ji Tianxing waved his hand and said, "There's no harm in speaking frankly." President Feng Yin could only comply and explained, "According to the various sayings that I heard, it seems that more than 1,100 years ago, there was a foreign race's evil divine monarch who attempted in vain to unify the world and enslave 100 races and trillions of living beings. That terrifying foreign race's evil god fed on the divine race's people and lived on the blood and souls of trillions of living beings, using this to increase his power. It was like the legendary ancient fierce beast Dao Tai, devouring all living things to strengthen itself. Once that foreign race's evil god scheme succeeded, the entire boundless heaven continent would be plunged into an abyss of suffering, consigned to eternal damnation. Hence, the Azura God Emperor led the 800 warriors under his command to fight back. The various divine monarchs of the boundless heaven continent also led divine monarch experts to participate in the battle one after another. Everyone's will was as strong as a stronghold, cooperating sincerely and launching a decisive battle with the foreign race's evil god in outer space. In the end, countless martyrs sacrificed valiantly before successfully slaying that foreign race's evil god and protecting the boundless heaven continent. The Azura God Emperor worked hard and made great contributions, receiving the love and respect of all the divine monarchs, becoming the overlord of the continent." Hearing up to here, Ji Tianxing frowned, a contemptuous sneer flashing across his eyes. Chao Qingyu and Yank exchanged glances and muttered disdainfully, "Ha ha, Such words can only fool the ignorant commoners, how laughable. President Feng Yin was secretly alarmed when he heard this, but he did not dare to open his mouth to refute. Ji Tianxing did not mind, raised his hand and said, "Continue talking about the Golden Dragon Abyss." President Feng Yin nodded and continued to explain. After the Golden Dragon Abyss appeared, it attracted countless experts to explore. However, that abyss was sealed by the seven-colored earth core divine fire all year round. Even peak divine monarchs could not enter, and would be reduced to ashes if they were careless. Fortunately, every 100 years, the seven-colored earth core divine fire would have a 2-month period of weakness, and many loopholes and gaps would appear. Taking advantage of that period, regardless of whether experts sneaked into the Golden Dragon Abyss, they obtained large amounts of rare treasures and top-notch materials inside. Chapter 3356. As the saying goes, wealth comes from danger. Even though the Golden Dragon Abyss is very dangerous and many Sir God experts have died in it. However, every 100 years, there will be a large number of lucky people who bring out rare treasures from the Golden Dragon Abyss. Those bountiful gains will increase the strength of the lucky people and they will quickly accumulate a huge amount of wealth. This is a fatal attraction to other experts and forces. Therefore, every 100 years, there will be countless experts and forces entering the Golden Dragon Abyss dauntlessly. President Feng Yin was very tactful. After a long explanation, there would always be a short pause to give Ji Tianxing and the other two time to think. After 10 breaths, he continued, "It's another 100 years this year. Just half a month ago, the seven-colored earth core divine fire that sealed the abyss started to weaken. Many experts and forces entered the Golden Dragon Abyss to explore and search for treasures in the magma sea deep underground. However, half a month ago, there was an accident. In the magma sea, there seemed to be a terrifying explosion or a large number of experts fighting. Those divine lord powerhouses that had entered the abyss had all disappeared without a trace or any news. Most likely, they had perished. However, some people saw at the edge of the magma sea that there was a brilliant vision of heaven and earth in the magma sea. There were also powerful divine objects. No one knew what divine objects they were. However, more than a dozen witnesses claimed that the light and aura of those divine objects were more brilliant and terrifying than any monarch-grade divine weapon. Those are powerful divine objects that they have never seen before. They are very likely to be God-King-grade rare treasures. Hearing up to this point, Ji Tianxing nodded and analyzed. So, after the news spread out, it caused the various powers and experts from all over to swarm over. Even the Wind Hidden Guild and the other 4 forces decided to join forces to explore the Golden Dragon Abyss. Since Ji Tianxing heard their conversation, President Feng Yin did not hide it anymore and nodded. That's right. If it were ordinary monarch-grade divine objects and materials, it would be nothing to us. Every force has the corresponding stock. However, a king-grade divine object is different. It is a rare opportunity and also the hope of a peak Sir God to reach the God-King realm. Not only us, any top force in the Golden Dragon domain will not miss this opportunity. Fortunately, the news is only circulating in a small area and not widely. I reckon that only the royal families of the various empires and the top 10 top forces know about the news of the king-grade divine object. Ji Tianxing nodded slightly and said with a smile, "You are indeed very tactful. You are willing to tell this king about the news of the king-grade divine object. Aren't you afraid that this king will also explore the Golden Dragon Abyss and search for treasures and you will return empty-handed?" Guild leader Feng Yin also revealed a smile and flattered him at the right time. With young master's strength and status, you may not be interested in ordinary king-grade divine objects. Of course, if you want to go to the Golden Dragon Abyss, the newly born king-grade divine object will most likely be yours. Our Hidden Wind Society is willing to serve young master. If we can help you achieve your wish, it would be our honor. Not to mention the Hidden Wind Society, even the royal families and top forces of the various large empires did not dare to easily offend a godly king powerhouse. Since that's the case, tell me about your plan of action first. If this king is interested, this king will give you a chance to perform. President Feng Yin's eyes lit up and his spirit was roused. He hurriedly said, "Young master, to be honest, our Wind Hidden Guild and the other 4 forces can all rank in the top 10 in the Gari Yi Empire. But the ones who recently went to the Golden Dragon Abyss to explore and search for treasures are the various empires' royal families and the top forces. We can only join hands to have the confidence to enter the abyss smoothly. Everyone was very cautious and considered for over 10 days before making up their minds. As for the plan of action and the target, we have already formulated it long ago. This time, our target for the Golden Dragon Abyss is the Red Rock Island in the depths of the Magma Sea. Because we received news that someone saw traces of a king-grade divine object on the Red Rock Island and a few nearby islands. Ji Tianqing nodded and indicated for President Feng Yin to continue. President Feng Yin added a few more sentences and told Ji Tianqing everything he knew about the Golden Dragon Abyss. After he finished, he looked at Ji Tianqing patiently and waited for Ji Tianqing's decision. Ji Tianqing thought for a moment and said with a faint smile, "Old man, you are very sensible. This king is very satisfied with your performance. This king has said before that this king wants to reward you." President Feng Yin hurriedly waved his hand and bowed, "Young master, you are too serious. It is this old man's honor to be able to serve you. How would I dare to ask for a reward?" Although he said no, he was actually very excited. His blood was boiling and he was looking forward to it. He was already fantasizing about what this white-robed god king would reward him with. He had been a peak divine lord for many years. If the white-robed god king gave him a few pointers or gave him half a king-grade divine ability, it would be enough for him to study for a lifetime. At the very least, he could see the hope of breaking through to the god king realm. But unfortunately, President Feng Yin thought too much. Ji Tianqing chuckled and said, "This king has decided to go to the Golden Dragon Abyss with you as a guest elder of the Wind Hidden Guild. How is it? Are you satisfied with this reward?" President Feng Yin had a stunned look and was somewhat at a loss whether to laugh or cry. He was also somewhat disappointed in his heart. Chao Qingyu also could not resist wanting to laugh and explained, "Old man, looks like you are not satisfied with my young master's reward. Don't be discontent. How noble is my young master. He is willing to be a guest elder of the Wind Hidden Guild for a few days. That is condescending and is your honor. Moreover, with my young master accompanying you to the Golden Dragon Abyss, all powerhouses and factions have to stand aside. Due to my young master's invincible might, who dares to block the Wind Hidden Guild's path? At that time, my young master will obtain a king-grade divine object. Your Wind Hidden Guild will also reap the benefits. Wouldn't it be perfect?" Hearing Chao Qingyu say so, President Feng Yin's brows smoothed out, and his mood was much better. Chao Qingyu continued, "During this period, if you perform well and serve the young master with all your heart. After the matter is done, the young master will casually give you a few pointers and it will benefit you endlessly. Don't blame this king for not reminding you. The young master's identity, strength, and methods are far beyond your imagination. This is the greatest opportunity in your life, the last chance to change your destiny. If you don't grasp it, you will regret it until you die." Although Chao Qingyu exaggerated, it was also the truth. Guild leader Feng Yin already had such thoughts in mind. After hearing Chao Qingyu's reminder, he became even more excited. Of course, he did not lose his reason in his agitation and excitement. Towards Ji Tianqing trio, he still had a trace of vigilance. After all, both sides talked until now, he did not even know the names of Ji Tianqing trio. Chapter 3357. The cooperation between the two sides came to an initial agreement just like that. President Feng Yin's mood was very complicated. He was excited and expectant, but also somewhat nervous and worried. He had lived for tens of thousands of years. To be able to become a peak divine lord and establish such a huge foundation like the Wind Hidden Guild, it could be seen that his thoughts were meticulous and his methods were superb. But tonight's matter was really too absurd. Not to mention others who did not believe it, even he found it hard to believe. This old man has always been known for doing things carefully all my life. Why am I so reckless and impulsive tonight? Although the strength of these three people is formidable, this old man not only agreed to cooperate, but also looked forward to it in my heart. Could it be that this old man has been stuck in the peak divine lord realm for too long and my mental state has been affected? After thinking over and over again, President Feng Yin still decided to pluck up his courage and ask for Ji Tianqing Trio's names. This. Young master, this old man boldly asks, what is your title? Don't misunderstand, this old man has no other meaning. It's just that the three of you are pretending to be guests of the Wind Hidden Guild and will eventually meet with the other four forces. And this old man also has to explain to my subordinates. If I don't even know your names, it's two. Yank still had a straight face and glared at President Feng Yin. Why are you so long-winded, old man? What is your identity? What qualifications do you have to ask for young master's name? President Feng Yin was depressed in his heart, but he did not dare to show any dissatisfaction. He could only apologize to Yank. But Ji Tianqing was reasonable and opened his mouth to help President Feng Yin out of the situation. Just call this king young master Ji to outsiders. As for Chao Qingyu and Yank, he did not introduce them. Anyway, there was no need to. President Feng Yin hurriedly bowed and thanked him. Many thanks for young master Ji's understanding. This old man represents the entire Wind Hidden Guild to thank you for your help and support. Welcome to the Wind Hidden Guild. Ji Tianqing waved his hand and said, all right, this matter is settled. We will wait here. You go and prepare the relevant matters now. We will set off with you tomorrow. President Feng Yin hurriedly bowed and accepted the order. After saying goodbye, he left the secret chamber. Just as he turned to leave the secret chamber, he stopped and revealed a bitter smile, muttering to himself, I'm really old and muddle. That's the secret place of our society, the secret room where I cultivate in seclusion. I must have lost my mind. I actually gave up the secret chamber and let 3 strangers stay in it. Alas. However, what was done could not be undone. He could not turn around and ask Ji Tianqing and the others to leave. Right now, he could only go with the flow and hope that nothing else would go wrong. With this thought in mind, President Feng Yin quickly left the underground palace to inform the vice president, guardians, and elders. President Feng Yin was very busy. There was only 1 day left before the elite forces of the Hidden Wind Society would depart for the Golden Dragon Abyss. Before he set off, he had to ensure that everything was taken care of and no mistakes were made. Fortunately, Ji Tianqing and the other 2 stayed in the underground palace's secret chamber. They did not show their faces and did not cause any trouble. Ji Tianqing sat by the stone table and closed his eyes, waiting patiently. Chao Qingyu stood behind him and asked worriedly, young master, we trusted that old man so easily. Will there be any problems? Ji Tianqing shook his head and said, don't worry. That old man shouldn't lie to us. There's also no need. The Golden Dragon Abyss isn't considered some top secret. We can find any top faction and we can inquire about the specific location. Furthermore, we don't need the Hidden Wind Society to do anything. We just need them to lead the way. Only then did Chao Qingyu feel relieved and said with a nod, that's true too. Seeing that old man is very sensible, I reckon that he won't play any tricks either. The waiting time was very boring. Fortunately, the 3 people closed their eyes and rested, circulating their cultivation and regulating their breathing. They also muddled through the day. Very soon, it was the 2nd night. President Feng Yin entered the secret chamber with a flushed face and paid his respects to Ji Tianqing and the others. Young Master Ji, the elite forces of the Hidden Wind Society have already assembled. We can set off now. Ji Tianqing nodded his head and brought along Chao Qingyu and Yank, following President Feng Yin out of the secret chamber. Everyone came to the surface and saw over 40 figures standing in the courtyard under the night sky. These people were all Sir God experts. The weakest one was at the 4th or 5th level of the Sir God realm. Of course, most of them were middle-level Sir Gods. There were only 15 upper-level Sir Gods who had reached the 7th stage realm and above. Among them, there were only 2 peak Sir Gods. They were President Feng Yin and Vice President. With such strong strength, no matter which empire they were placed in, they would be a top team of experts. President Feng Yin introduced Ji Tianqing and the others grandly, saying that they were the mysterious guests of the Hidden Wind Society who had been hiding for many years. The elite Sir Gods of the Hidden Wind Society were stunned by the bluff. They actually believed it and their morale was greatly boosted. They were filled with excitement. After that, everyone boarded a Supreme-grade Monarch-class ship and left the Imperial City. 15 minutes later, the ship arrived at a forest in the south of the city and stopped in the sky above the forest. In the surrounding night sky, there were already 4 ships docked. There were more than 30 or 40 divine lords in each divine battleship. Obviously, they were the elite forces of the Fiery Demon Gang, Earthfiend Alliance, Wonder Lord Hall, and Wind Tower. Swoosh, swoosh, swoosh. 2 to 3 figures flew out from each ship and came near President Feng Yin. Those Sir Gods were the Fiery Demon Gang Master, Granny Evil, Wonder Lord Hall Master, Wind Tower Master, and their assistants. President Feng Yin and Vice President also clustered around Ji Tianxing and the others. They came to the night sky and greeted everyone. Old Man Feng, everyone is ready. President Feng, you are finally here. Can we set off now? Our brothers are getting impatient from waiting. Let's not waste any more time. Hey! President Feng, the 3 beside you look unfamiliar. Everyone greeted President Feng Yin and also noticed Ji Tianxing and the others. They could not help but look at them suspiciously. President Feng Yin smiled and nodded. He introduced them to everyone. Everyone, these 3 are the guest elders of the Hidden Wind Society who have been hiding for many years. Usually, if there is nothing important, the 3 distinguished guest elders will not show themselves. Now that we are exploring the Golden Dragon Abyss, we have to do our best to invite the 3 guest elders. Hearing this, the leaders looked strange. They looked at Ji Tianxing and the others with burning eyes. Ha ha ha! Old Man Feng, you have hidden so deeply. We have never heard that your Hidden Wind Society has hidden guest elders before. President Feng, looking at your reaction, it seems that you are determined to get the new king-level divine object. You Feng Yin know how to eat meat, but you have to leave some soup for us 4 brothers. The leader's words were sarcastic. Unknowingly, they were already on guard against the Hidden Wind Society. After all, the relationship between these forces was based on interests. They would also scheme against each other. President Feng Yin was pleased with himself. On the surface, he still had to pretend to be polite to the 4 leaders. However, Yank was very impatient. He could not stand their hypocritical faces. He said with a black face, "Cut the crap. Let's set off quickly." Hearing this, the leaders of the 4 forces were unhappy. They looked at Yank with sneers. They did not have good intentions. Chapter 3358. This guest is not only big, but he also has a bad temper. I just don't know how capable you are. Old Man Feng, your Hidden Wind Society's guest doesn't seem to take us seriously. President Feng hasn't given the order yet, but you, a guest, are giving orders. Is the Hidden Wind Society unruly? The Balrog gang leader, Granny Shaw, and Master Chijuan were all mocking Yank and President Feng Yin. They didn't hide their anger and hostility towards Yank. After all, they were the leaders of their respective factions. They were the top experts and big shots in the Gari Yi Empire. Of course, they were arrogant. Yank wasn't easy to deal with either. He glared and stretched out his thick arms, wanting to teach the Balrog gang leader and the others a lesson. Fortunately, President Feng Yin and Vice President Feng Yin quickly mediated and stopped both sides. Both sides didn't make a move and suppressed their anger. Soon, everyone returned to their respective divine warships and set off. 5 divine warships flew across the night sky at lightning speed, heading straight for the Golden Dragon Empire in the south. On the way, Ji Tianxing stayed in the secret chamber to cultivate and wait patiently. Chao Qingyu and Yank followed him. They were meditating and didn't show up. According to President Feng Yin, the divine warships had to travel for 10 days without rest to reach the Golden Dragon Abyss in the Golden Dragon Empire. During this time, President Feng Yin didn't rest and received a large number of messages every day. These were the latest news that the various branches of the Hidden Wind Society had investigated and collected. Therefore, President Feng Yin knew the situation around the Golden Dragon Abyss quite well even before he reached it. Knowing that the situation in the Golden Dragon Abyss was changing every day and that the situation was getting worse, President Feng Yin's expression became more serious. About 6 days later, the divine warships were getting closer to the Golden Dragon Empire. President Feng Yin, the Balrog gang leader, Granny Shaw, and the others noticed that more and more divine warships and teams appeared in the sky around them. Almost all the divine warships were top-grade monarch level. They were fully armed and were moving at top speed. Every divine warship was imprinted with the emblems and seals of various empires and factions. Inside each divine ship, there were 12 to 100 divine lord powerhouses. Although these divine warships came from all directions, their target was the Golden Dragon Empire and the Endless Forest in the southwest. There was no doubt that these were the top factions from various empires. Many forces and powerhouses were heading for the Golden Dragon Abyss. The Flame Demon gang leader, Granny Evil, President Feng Yin, and the others all felt more and more pressure. The worry and apprehension in their hearts gradually deepened. 10 days Yin's Wind Society. On the morning of the Golden Dragon Abyss, the divine warship was of the Golden Dragon Abyss. President Feng's was. He brought Chao Qingyu and Yang Ku to the main hall of the divine ship. He released his divine perception to check the surroundings. The sky was blue, and the sun was rising from the east. Below the divine warship was a boundless dark green forest that seemed to stretch to the horizon. The sky above the forest was filled with dense green wood divine power. All kinds of flowers, plants, and trees grew wildly in the forest. Towering ancient trees could be seen everywhere. Above the forest, there were dozens of divine warships of various sizes. Some were floating in the sky, motionless, while others were rushing forward. Thousands of miles away, there was an empty area thousands of miles wide. It was a stark contrast to the forest. It was like a giant pit in the forest. In the huge dark brown pit, colorful flames and surging black smoke continued to rise into the sky. They were still far away, but everyone could feel the scorching heat in the air. Without a doubt, that giant pit was the entrance to the Golden Dragon Abyss. Around the abyss, there were all kinds of divine warships. Of course, there were also many birds and mounts in the sky, waiting for orders. Seeing this, Ji Tianxing raised his eyebrows and said calmly, "It seems that the news of the Golden Dragon Abyss has spread. Many factions have arrived before us." President Feng Yin nodded with a serious expression and said in a low voice, "According to the news we received, the entire Golden Dragon domain has been alarmed in the past 10 days. More than 180 factions from 12 empires have sent their elite forces and experts to explore the Golden Dragon Abyss. I just checked. The divine warships and mounts left on the ground were left behind to provide support. The elite forces have already entered the abyss. We came a little late. If we want to gain something, we have to take more risks than the others." Hearing this, the vice president, left and right protectors, and a few elders all had serious expressions. Ji Tianxing did not have much of a reaction. He said, "There's no time to lose. We should take action." "Okay." President Feng Yin agreed with his decision. He quickly left the divine warship with many divine monarchs. Like the other factions, he left 8 divine monarchs and 30 divine monarchs to guard the divine warship and wait for orders on the ground. Swoosh, swoosh swoosh. Ji Tianxing, President Feng Yin, and the rest of the 40 divine monarchs flew across the sky. In the other 4 divine warships, the Fire Demon Gangmaster, Granny Evil, and the rest also brought over 30 divine monarchs to gather. The 180 divine monarchs from the 5 factions quickly gathered. Everyone had a simple conversation. They all felt great pressure and were very anxious. "Let's go." Following President Feng Yin's order, everyone flew across the vast forest and headed straight for the entrance of the Golden Dragon Abyss. Soon, the crowd arrived in front of him. Upon closer inspection, they realized that the entrance to the abyss was very big. It had a radius of 3,000 miles. In the past, the entrance to the abyss was sealed by the 7-colored earth core divine fire. It was like being covered by a 7-colored curtain. There were no gaps or loopholes. However, it was different now. The 7-colored light curtain that sealed the entrance was broken and filled with cracks and loopholes. There were more than 100 loopholes the size of a water tank. There were more than a dozen loopholes the size of a house. Looking down through the broken light curtain, one could see that the abyss was bottomless. The abyss was filled with balls of 7-colored divine fire. The surrounding rock walls were also burned red by the 7-colored divine fire. Dark red lava constantly flowed out and dripped into the abyss. Swoosh, swoosh. The divine monarchs from the 5 factions passed through a few loopholes and flew into the Golden Dragon abyss. They flew straight down. As everyone dived deeper, the surrounding temperature became higher. The balls of 7-colored divine fire became denser. Everyone had to slow down and carefully avoid the 7-colored divine fire. Chapter 33:59. Everyone, be careful. Follow closely, don't fall behind. These 7-colored divine fires are the fire essence of the Earth's core. Their power is unpredictable. Once they touch them, they'll be injured even if they don't die. The 7-colored divine fires are sentient and not inanimate objects. They can also swim. Everyone, be careful. As the team advanced toward the abyss, the leaders did not forget to remind the godly lords to avoid the 7-colored divine fires. Indeed, the balls of 7-colored divine fires of different sizes were very dense. They were like billions of balls of light that swam and churned in the abyss. The big balls of fire were the size of houses, and the smallest was the size of a fist. Not to mention touching the balls of 7-colored divine fire, even getting close would be unbearably scorched. More than 180 godly lords released their divine power to form shields to protect themselves. While diving, everyone was extremely cautious and careful, constantly avoiding the balls of fire. Only Ji Tianxing, Chao Qingyu, and Yank remained calm and did not take it to heart. After flying for a while, the trio's speed became slower and slower, showing signs of falling behind. Seeing the godly lords trembling with fear, Yank could not help but sneer disdainfully. A bunch of ants. They're just 7-colored divine fires. What's there to be afraid of? Although Chao Qingyu was not as arrogant as him, he also nodded in agreement. These godly lords are also ignorant. They entered the abyss with great fanfare to search for king-level divine items. Little do they know that these 7-colored divine fires are king-level divine power. If they can refine these 7-colored divine fires, even if it's just a wisp, they'll gain a lot. As he spoke, he secretly cast a spell to swallow 2 balls of 7-colored divine fires and refined them in a short while. Ji Tianxing naturally would not let go of this opportunity. Borrowing the power of the heaven-mending pearl, 2 pitch-black vortexes appeared in his palms, constantly swallowing the balls of fire around him. The 2 of you make it sound so easy. To godly lords, these 7-colored divine fires are indeed beneficial. After refining them, they can strengthen fire elemental divine Tao laws. But those godly lords can't control such violent divine power at all. Once it comes into contact with the 7-colored divine fire, its divine body will definitely be burned to ashes. As expected. As soon as he finished speaking, a series of screams came from the back of the group. As it turned out, the 2 middle-level divine lords had been too nervous and had not been able to dodge the fist-sized balls of 7-colored divine flames in time. In the end, those balls of 7-colored divine flames ran into them. Their divine power shields were shattered, and their divine bodies were burned by the 7-colored divine flames. They were severely injured on the spot. One lost his entire right leg and was burned to ashes. The other one had lost his left arm, and his abdomen was burned with a large hole, from which blood kept gushing out. Although such heavy injuries were not fatal, the 2 divine lords were still in unbearable pain. Their combat strength plummeted. The surrounding divine monarchs wanted to go over and help, but the 7-colored divine flames were too dense, so they didn't dare to act rashly. They could only worry helplessly. The few leaders flying at the front of the group were also alarmed by the 2 Sir God's screams. They all stopped and turned around to check the situation. The 2 leaders immediately frowned when they saw that the 2 injured divine lords were from Wonderlord Hall and Balrog sect respectively. I already told you to be careful. Why were you still so careless? There's no point in following the group with such heavy injuries. Return to the divine warship to heal. Thus, the 2 injured Sir Gods had no choice but to leave the group and fly out of the abyss. Then, the group continued to fly toward the bottom of the abyss. 15 minutes later, the group had flown 9,000 miles underground, but they still hadn't reached the bottom of the abyss. At this time, the group was moving slower and slower, and the number of people was also decreasing. After all, the closer they were to the bottom of the abyss, The higher the temperature and the more concentrated the seven-colored divine flames were. There were even violent shockwaves and hurricanes at the bottom of the abyss that carried billions of seven-colored divine flames. They came crashing down like raging waves. All the Sir Gods found it difficult to resist and could only try their best to dodge. Most people were able to dodge the fireballs, but there were always a few unlucky Sir Gods who were hit by the seven-colored divine flames and were severely injured. In just 15 minutes, the number of people in the group had decreased by more than 30. None of the 5 forces were spared. They all had more or less Sir Gods killed or injured. Under such circumstances, the leaders of the 5 forces all had ugly expressions and heavy hearts. They knew that the Golden Dragon Abyss was very dangerous. But they didn't expect the situation in the abyss to be even more complicated. The seven-colored divine flames were so violent. Soon, another quarter of an hour had passed. The group slowly dived for more than 800 miles. In another 100 miles, they would reach the lava sea at the bottom of the abyss. At this time, another 2 Sir Gods at the back of the group were hit by the seven-colored divine flames. One of the Sir Gods had a huge hole burned in his chest. His organs were reduced to ashes and his body was almost destroyed. The other Sir God was even worse. His entire head was burned to ashes. Not only was his body destroyed, even his godhead was destroyed. He died on the spot. Coincidentally, these 2 Sir Gods weren't far from Ji Tianqing and company. The leaders heard the screams and turned to look again. Seeing the Sir Gods of the Fire Demon Gang die and the Sir Gods of the Oddlord Hall severely injured, the 2 leaders frowned and their faces darkened. How many times do I have to repeat myself? Can you be more careful yourselves? The leader of the Oddlord Hall shouted angrily. The leader of the Fire Demon Gang stared at Ji Tianqing and company. His eyes flashed coldly as he asked, "What are you 3 doing? As guest elders of the Hidden Wind Society, why aren't you leading the way? Why are you hiding at the back of the group?" Hearing this, the leaders and experts of the various forces gathered their gazes on Ji Tianqing and the other 2. The leader of the Oddlord Hall was also gloomy. He sneered and said, "Not long after we entered the abyss, I found them sneaking around and deliberately hiding at the back of the group. Tell me, what are you trying to do?" Granny Shaw didn't hide her anger. She sneered and said, "What a coincidence. There were a few times when people were burned by the seven-colored divine flames and they all appeared near you. I suspect that you are the ones behind this, deliberately harming our people." The leader of the Wind Whispering Tower was stunned for a moment. Then, realization dawned on him. He shouted angrily, "That's right. I found it strange before. Now, I finally understand. The first half of our group can basically avoid the seven-colored divine flames. Only the people at the back of the group are burned by the divine flames every few days. They must be deliberately harming us." Instantly, the atmosphere froze, and the atmosphere became tense. More than 100 Sir Gods from the 4 forces glared at Ji Tianqing and company. Their eyes were filled with hostility. In fact, Ji Tianqing and company weren't innocent. They had been at the back of the group and devoured the seven-colored divine flames around them when no one was paying attention. Those seven-colored divine flames could move and were very dense. Then, they cast spells to guide them and thousands of divine flames would speed up and fly toward them. The Sir Gods who were closer to them were naturally more likely to be affected. Book Guest House Reading Website. Chapter 3360. Just as they were about to reach the bottom of the abyss, the team stopped moving forward. The people from the Fire Demon Gang, Earthfiend Alliance, Wonderlord Hall, and Wind Whisper Tower were all glaring at Ji Tianqing and company with hostility. The Sir Gods who were closer to them quickly distanced themselves from them and were on high alert. Seeing this, President Feng Yin and Vice President felt a headache coming on. They quickly tried to persuade the 4 leaders. "Everyone, what are you doing? How can you accuse our guest elders for no reason? The 4 leaders are heartbroken over the loss of your men. Everyone can understand your feelings. But you can't lie through your teeth. Everyone knows that other than the Divine King, no one dares to touch the Rainbow Divine Fire. No matter how capable our 3 guest elders are, it's impossible for them to tamper with this matter. Not only did your 4 forces lose men, Our wind-hidden guild also had 6 Sir Gods injured and forced to retreat from the abyss. However, President Feng Yin and Vice President Feng Yin's persuasion was completely useless. The leaders of the 4 forces already hated Yank. Now that the 4 of them had joined forces against Ji Tianxing and company, they would not give in easily. Don't tell me these useless things. Why are the 3 of them at the back of the team? Isn't it because they have a guilty conscience? Old man Feng, why don't you explain to me why the divine monarchs who were in trouble were all nearby them? President Feng, don't affect the cooperation of our 5 forces because of those 3 guys. If you don't want the plan to end, then ask them to scram. That's right. Those 3 guys have ulterior motives. Our Wind Whisper Tower will never be with them. The 4 leaders were very determined and their goal was clear. They wanted President Feng Yin to chase Ji Tianxing and company away. Otherwise, the 4 forces would join forces to explore the Golden Dragon Abyss and leave the Wind-Hidden Guild alone. There were at least 100 forces exploring the Golden Dragon Abyss now. If the Wind-Hidden Guild fought alone, it would be difficult for them to even move an inch, let alone explore and search for treasures. Once they had a conflict with any of the forces, the Wind-Hidden Guild would be in danger. The 4 leaders were very certain that President Feng Yin would not dare to take the risk and would definitely follow their advice. As expected, President Feng Yin understood the meaning of the 4 leaders. His face immediately changed and he asked angrily, "What do you mean? Are they joining forces to pressure me? You guys are being so unreasonable. What if I don't agree? Could it be that you want to abandon the Hidden Wind Society and join forces with the 4 of you?" The Flame Devil gang leader revealed a mocking sneer and nodded. "Old Feng, it's good that you understand in your heart. It won't sound good if you say it out loud. In short, those 3 guys aren't good people. They have ulterior motives. We don't want to associate with them." Either he chased those 3 guys away, or Feng Yin would act alone. Think about it yourself. Granny Evil, Hall Master Qi Jun, and the Wind Whispering Tower Master all nodded in agreement. Yes, the Flame Devil gang leader's words are also our thoughts. Old Feng, you're a smart man, don't make a mistake. Don't blame us for being merciless. If you want to blame someone, blame your 3 guest elders. They destroyed the trust between us. Seeing the unyielding attitude of the 4 leaders, the expressions of Feng Yin and the vice guild leader turned even uglier. "This, guild leader, what should we do?" President Feng Yin frowned and pondered. He was hesitant as he looked at Ji Tianxing and the other 2. He wanted to say something but hesitated. However, even if he was ostracized by the 4 major forces and was slandered and attacked by many Sir Gods, Ji Tianxing's expression did not change. His expression was indifferent. Chao Qingyu was also very calm. His eyes swept across the people from the 4 major forces and firmly remembered the 100 over people. He was already mentally prepared that Feng Yin would act alone. If the people from the 4 major forces were to act together and encounter any danger, not only would he not help them, he would also want to add insult to injury. Yank's temper was not so restrained. When the 4 leaders attacked and slandered them for harming the other Sir Gods, he was already filled with anger and murderous intent. Now that the situation had developed to such a stage, his anger was completely ignited. He. Originally, I didn't want to argue with you, but I didn't expect you to continue. You want a yard after taking an inch. You bunch of trash dare to boast shamelessly and ask me to scram? As he spoke, Yank grinned hideously. He clenched his fists and walked towards the 4 leaders. President Feng Yin's expression changed. He hurriedly came forward and advised anxiously, "Stop it quickly, let's talk nicely. Don't start a conflict. I believe that you have no intention of harming others. You can explain to them." Before Feng Yin could finish, Yank stretched out his huge palm and pushed him away. "You want me to explain to this bunch of trash? Who do they think they are? They're just like ants. Are they worthy?" As he cursed, Yank's 10 feet tall body emitted raging anger and murderous intent. He ignored the 7-colored divine fire that flew towards him and flew towards the 4 leaders with a hideous smile. Balrog gang leader, Granny Evil, Chijuan Hall Master, and Wind Whisper Tower Master heard Yank's arrogant words and were instantly enraged. All of them were seething with anger and murderous intent. Ha 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 ha. That stone-like monster, how dare he insult us? How can there be such an arrogant and reckless person? I've lived for so many years. This is really an eye-opener. Come, come, come. Let me see what kind of ability a big monster like you has. How dare you be so arrogant? Old man Feng, this is your family's guest who is asking for death. Don't blame us for being ruthless. As they sneered and cursed, the four leaders took out their divine weapons and madly accumulated divine power in their bodies. They had all locked onto Yank's aura and were ready to use a fatal blow at any time. Yank flew to 100 feet away from them and stood still. He did not use any weapons. He only twisted his neck and fists, looking like he was about to start a massacre. It seemed that a great battle was about to break out. The people of the four major forces were gloating and waiting to watch a good show. The people of Feng Yin were very worried and tried to persuade him. President Feng Yin knew that he could not persuade Yank. He quickly flew to Ji Tianxing and said in an almost pleading tone, "Young Master Ji, please ask him to stop. Please do not start a conflict. Otherwise, they will abandon Feng Yin Guild and we will be unable to move forward. We can only return empty-handed." Ji Tianxing looked at him expressionlessly, then frowned and asked, "What? Feng Yin Guild can't explore the Golden Dragon Abyss without the four major forces? Are you going to be a coward when they join forces to bully Feng Yin Guild?" Guild leader Feng Yin was suddenly at a loss for words. But the vice president was quick-witted. He suddenly thought of something and quickly reminded him, "President, didn't you tell us that each of these three guests is equivalent to 1,000,000 troops? Any one of them is equivalent to 10 Sir Gods. You didn't lie to us, did you? If that's the case, then why should our Hidden Wind Society swallow this humiliation? It shouldn't be a problem even if we act alone, right?" Chapter 3361. Hearing the vice president's reminder, the Hidden Wind Guild leader was stunned. I did say that. He had to admit this, but his heart was still beating like a drum, and he was uneasy. After all, he only guessed that Ji Tianxing and the other two were divine kings. He had never seen Ji Tianxing and the other two in action, so his guess had not been confirmed. He was still uncertain. If Ji Tianxing and the other two were not divine kings, the Hidden Wind Guild would be finished. Just as he was hesitating, Ji Tianxing said calmly, "Yank, take it easy. Just teach them a lesson." "Yes, sir." Yank did not even turn his head and answered reluctantly. The four leaders laughed even harder when they heard that, and their tone was full of disdain. "Ha ha ha ha, are those three crazy? Do they really think they are the best of the best? That big monster dares to attack us? Old man Feng, you heard it. It's not that we don't want to give you face, but your three honorable guests are looking for death." After saying that, the four leaders waved their divine weapons at the same time and released a destructive divine power. They attacked Yank together. In order to suppress the Hidden Wind Guild and intimidate everyone, they did not care about their reputation and identity. They attacked Yank together. They wanted to kill him in one blow. Of course, Yang Ku could tell what they were thinking. A cold glint flashed across his eyes as he suddenly let out an angry roar. "You are looking for death." As he roared, he opened his palms, which were as big as a house, and created a hurricane that covered the sky. Instantly, the thousands of seven-colored divine flames in all directions were sucked to his side. Roar. Under his control, more than 4,000 rainbow divine fires of different sizes gathered into hundreds of rainbow divine fires, which were the size of water tanks. They attacked the four leaders at once. The hundreds of rainbow divine fires were solid, and their power was more than 10 times stronger than normal fires. Moreover, Yank released an invisible divine power to suppress the four leaders, which slowed them down and made it impossible for them to dodge. Boom! 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 The hundreds of rainbow divine fires destroyed the divine powers that the four leaders had used and drowned them. Seeing that, the hundreds of Sir Gods widened their eyes in shock and exclaimed in disbelief. The Sir Gods who were closer to the scene retreated in fear, afraid that they would be affected by the rainbow divine fires. The next moment, there was a deafening sound. Boom! Boom boom boom! More than 100 balls of 7-colored divine flames struck the 4 leaders one after another, creating a sea of sparks that blotted out the sky. The surging flames swept out in all directions like a giant wave, drowning dozens of divine lords. More than 20 balls of 7-colored divine fire blasted into the crowd of the 4 forces, sending dozens of divine lords flying. The rainbow divine fires, the divine fires were completely covered. The entire area was completely. Heart-wrenching screams and desperate cries of near death erupted continuously in the sea of fire, rising and falling one after another. The Wind Hidden Association's president, vice president, a few elders, and many Sir Gods of the Wind Hidden Association felt their scalps tingle as they watched. Their faces were filled with horror as cold sweat broke out on their backs. After a long while, the rainbow divine fires in the deep abyss dissipated. The deep abyss gradually calmed down and everyone saw what had happened to the 4 leaders. The Fire Demon Gangmaster and Granny Evil Spirit were the worst. Not only were their divine bodies destroyed, but their divine heads were also burned to ashes. The Strange Lord Hall Master and the Wind Listening Tower Master had their divine bodies destroyed. Only one divine head was left and there were cracks on it. Obviously, their divine heads were damaged and their consciousness was dizzy. They couldn't fight anymore. In addition, more than 70 Sir Gods from the 4 forces were affected by the rainbow divine fires and suffered heavy casualties. More than 50 Sir Gods were burned to death by the rainbow divine fires. Their divine heads and divine bodies were burned to ashes. The other 20 or so people were lucky enough to survive, but they were also severely injured from the burns, and they were filled with fear. Only 40 Sir Gods were far away from the battlefield. They retreated when they saw the situation wasn't right. However, their leaders were either killed or left with only one divine head. They couldn't continue exploring the deep abyss. The 70 Sir Gods who survived were scared out of their wits by Yank. They ran away in a panic. The Sir Gods only calmed down when they were 1,000 miles away from Yank. They were divided into 4 teams. They glared at the Wind Hidden Society and Ji Tianxing. They hated them to the core. President Feng Yin, your guest elder actually killed our gang leader. Just you wait. The Fire Demon Gang will remember this. Wind Hidden Society, the Earth Emanations Alliance will never forgive you. Old Man Feng, you are so evil. How dare you kill your comrades? Just you wait. We will return to the Gari Yi Empire and announce your evil deeds to the public. The Vice Gang Masters, Vice Hall Masters, and Vice Alliance Masters of the 4 forces were more or less injured. However, they all survived. They were furious and scolded the Wind Hidden Society and Yank for their crimes. President Feng Yin and Vice President Feng Yin were stunned. They knew that Ji Tianxing and the other 2 were strong. However, they didn't expect Yank to be so powerful. He killed 4 leaders and more than 50 Sir Gods in one move. Now, the Wind Hidden Society had become the target of public criticism. They had become sworn enemies with the 4 forces. President Feng Yin was at a loss when faced with the accusations and scoldings of the 4 forces. He was dizzy. At the critical moment, Yank stepped forward and scared off the people from the 4 forces. He clenched his fists and looked at the Sir Gods with murderous intent. He smiled cruelly and said, "How dare you threaten me and take revenge? If that's the case, don't even think about escaping. All of you will die here." The moment he said that, the Sir Gods from the 4 forces were so scared that they shrank their necks. All of them were like stray dogs. They ran away with their tails between their legs. They didn't dare to stay for even a moment. In the blink of an eye, the 70 Sir Gods disappeared without a trace. In the abyss, only Ji Tianxing and the other 2 were left. There were also 24 Sir Gods from the Wind Hidden Society. The left and right protectors, a few elders and many Sir Gods were very afraid of Ji Tianxing and the other 2. They hid far away and didn't dare to get close. However, the vice president was overjoyed. He was shocked and shouted excitedly, "Too scary. Too powerful." With such powerful guests, why would the Wind Hidden Society worry about not being able to dominate the world? Guests, whether we can live a good life in the future depends on you. Compared to the vice president's excitement, President Feng Yin couldn't be happy. The facts proved that he was right. Ji Tianxing and the other two were divine kings. At least, Yank could easily control the seven-colored divine fire. This was proof that he was a divine king expert. Because of this, President Feng Yin understood that the small wind-hidden society couldn't keep the three divine kings. After this adventure, the three divine kings would probably leave. What was left for the wind-hidden society was the hatred and revenge of the four forces. Young Master Ji, didn't you ask him to take it easy? How did it end up like this? President Feng Yin looked at Ji Tianxing pitifully. He wanted to cry but had no tears. Ahem. Ji Tianxing was a little embarrassed. He smiled and said, "The big fool has a bad temper. Get used to it." Chapter 3362. Blockhead. These three words suited Yang Ku's image. However, the words "get used to it" made President Feng Yin tremble and want to cry. Ji Tianxing glanced at him and asked, "Are you afraid? Then do you still want to continue exploring the Golden Dragon Abyss? If you don't want to take the risk, you can go back." Since they were already at the Golden Dragon Abyss, Feng Yin Guild was of no use to Ji Tianxing. If the people of the Hidden Wind Society returned, he would have one less burden. Of course, Feng Yin Guild had helped him, and he was not someone who would burn the bridge after crossing it. As long as Feng Yin Guild did not take the initiative to leave, he would chase them away. Although President Feng Yin was depressed, he nodded without hesitation when he heard Ji Tianxing's words. "Of course we have to continue exploring. We spent 10 days and lost so many people. It was not easy for us to reach the abyss. How can we give up so easily?" Although President Feng Yin said so, he was laughing bitterly in his heart. "We have a deep grudge with the four factions. If we do not enter the abyss to gain some benefits, wouldn't I die in vain?" Of course, he could only think about it in his heart and did not dare to say it out loud. "All right, let's continue. Let's not waste any more time." Ji Tianxing waved his hand and led Chao Qingyu and Yank to the magma sea below. After the previous incident, they no longer devoured the seven-colored divine fire and focused on their journey. Since the three of them had refined a large amount of divine fire, the power of their fire elemental laws had increased significantly. Continuing to refine the divine fire would not increase their power by much. President Feng Yin and the other divine lords also composed themselves and followed Ji Tianxing and company to the bottom of the abyss. Soon, the group arrived above the magma sea and stopped in midair to observe their surroundings. They were at the bottom of the abyss and the space around them suddenly opened up. The abyss above them was a deep well with a diameter of more than 2,000 miles. As for the magma sea below them, it was abnormally wide and boundless, connecting to the depths of the Earth's core. The dark red magma flowed slowly as seven-colored divine fire constantly emerged from the surface of the sea and floated above the magma sea. Looking into the distance, he could vaguely see some black dots scattered on the surface of the sea in all directions. President Feng Yin took the initiative to introduce, "Young Master Ji, those are some reef islands in the magma sea. They are usually made of very strong divine stones and metals. Precious divine stones and rare metals could be found on almost every reef island. There were even some lucky ones who discovered extremely rare medicinal herbs and rare treasures on those reef islands." Ji Tianxing, Chao Qingyu, and Yank were all god kings. They had more experience and knowledge than President Feng Yin. Of course, they knew that herbs growing on the magma sea and reef islands sounded very mysterious, but in fact, it was true. Those rare herbs were not ordinary herbs, but some special divine items. For example, the five-colored jade ganoderma, leafless rootless fruit, geocentric fire lotus, and so on. Ji Tianxing looked at President Feng Yin and asked, "Then what is your goal in coming to the abyss this time?" "Which reef island?" President Feng Yin pointed to the southeast and explained, "In that direction, about 500,000 miles away, there is an area with 10 large reef islands. Our goal is one of the Red Rock Islands. More than 20 days ago, there was news from the Golden Dragon Abyss that someone saw a worldly anomaly in that area. A king-level divine item was born." Ji Tianxing said with a faint smile, "Although many factions will choose other reef islands, most of the powerful factions will rush to that area, right?" President Feng Yin nodded and said with a serious expression, "That is indeed the case. Therefore, that place has the highest chance of finding a king-level divine item, but it is also the most dangerous. After hesitating for a moment, he added, if young Master Ji feels that it is too dangerous for us to go to Red Rock Island, we can go to other. Without waiting for him to finish, Ji Tianxing flew to the southeast and went to Red Rock Island. Yank followed with an expressionless face. Chao Qingyu patted President Feng Yin's shoulder and said with a playful smile, Old Feng, don't show off your little tricks in front of young Master. Young Master doesn't hate you yet, so you still have a chance to make a fortune. If you continue to do this, it will only backfire. When young Master hates you, it will be too late for you to cry. After saying that, Chao Qingyu also followed Ji Tianxing and flew to Red Rock Island. President Feng Yin was stunned and stared at Ji Tianxing and the other two with a complicated expression. He felt a little lucky. Fortunately, he did not say anything overboard, and Chao Qingyu reminded him in time. Otherwise, it would be too late for regrets if things really came to that point. If it was a normal day, they could cover the distance of 500,000 miles in a few hours. However, flying above the lava sea was full of seven-colored divine fire in all directions, so they had to slow down. Some of the seven-colored divine fire danced like willow catkins, some like floating clouds, and some formed whirlpools and hurricanes, raging above the sea. In short, the lava sea was extremely dangerous. Even upper-level and peak divine lords would be burned by the seven-colored divine fire if they were not careful, or even burned to ashes. 12 hours later, they had flown more than 400,000 miles and were not far from Red Rock Island. In the process of flying, they passed by hundreds of reef islands of different sizes. The big ones had a radius of dozens of miles, as big as a small city. The small ones had a radius of dozens of feet, as big as a house. Most of the reef islands were dark brown, but there were also many reef islands that were colorful due to the large number of special divine stones and metals. Even though those reef islands contained precious paragon stones and metals, and even 2 reef islands had paragon stone veins on them, they were still very valuable. However, Ji Tianxing and the rest continued their journey and did not stop to dig. After all, Ji Tianxing and the rest could use their divine consciousness to check that the divine stones and metals on the reef islands were all monarch-level upper-grade and supreme-grade materials. Although they were valuable, they would not catch the eye of a divine king expert. If they wasted time digging, they would definitely delay the search for a king-level divine object. They were getting closer and closer to Red Rock Island. At this time, the surface of the magma sea, which was still calm, suddenly began to boil. The extremely violent seven-colored divine fire condensed into dozens of flaming light pillars that rushed out of the lava sea and blasted towards the divine lords of the Hidden Wind Society. Faced with the sudden danger, President Feng Yin and many divine lords were already prepared. They hurriedly scattered in all directions to avoid the danger. Ji Tianxing, Chao Qingyu, and Yank did not panic. They stood in their original spots calmly and cast spells to block, dissolve, and devour the flaming light pillars. However, the speed of the flaming light pillars was extremely fast. A few divine lords could not avoid it and were hit on the spot. With a bang 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 sound, the few divine lords were killed on the spot. The flaming light pillars also became raging fire waves that swept across 100 miles. Chapter 3363. In the blink of an eye, President Feng Yin and the dozen Sir Gods were engulfed by the seven-colored divine fire. Everyone's divine power shield was instantly shattered by the seven-colored divine fire. The next moment, their divine bodies were about to be burned to ashes by the seven-colored divine fire. With the power of the flaming light pillars and the raging fire waves, most of the Sir Gods would die. It was estimated that only President Feng Yin and a few elders would be able to survive by luck. Seeing such a dangerous situation, the Vice President and the Sir Gods who escaped the Sea of Fire were anxious but helpless. With their strength, they could not rescue their companions. At the critical moment, Ji Tianxing decisively saved them. Swoosh! Swoosh! He raised his palms and used the engulfing divine power to create 2 huge black vortexes that covered a radius of 100 miles. In an instant, the raging fire waves and flaming light pillars were completely engulfed by the vortexes. President Feng Yin and more than 10 Sir Gods had narrowly escaped death. All of them revealed expressions as though they had survived a calamity. They were extremely happy and excited. However, it was too early for them to be happy. A few fiery red figures flew out from the sea of lava below. They extended their huge claws and pounced at them. No one was prepared for the existence of living creatures in the sea of lava. Moreover, the few monsters that were as big as houses and looked like toads moved very quickly and silently. It was impossible to guard against them. Bam! Bam! With two muffled sounds, two Sir Gods, who had yet to recover from their shock, were caught by the two monsters' giant claws while they were unprepared. The fiery red monsters seemed to be formed by lava. They were surrounded by the raging seven-colored divine fire. After the two Sir Gods were caught, they were immediately charred black. Black smoke rose from their bodies and black ashes drifted. Under the unparalleled pain, the two Sir Gods let out heart-wrenching screams. However, after 2 breaths, their screams stopped abruptly. This was because the two of them were torn to pieces by the monsters. Their divine bodies and divine sparks were burned to ashes. President Feng Yin and the 20 Sir Gods saw this scene with their own eyes and screamed, "Oh my God! It's the fire demon! We are so unlucky to have encountered the terrifying fire demon. Everyone, retreat! Retreat to young Master Ji's side. Don't panic. Be careful of your surroundings. There will definitely be other fire demons waiting for an opportunity to launch a sneak attack." Even though everyone was panicking and terrified. However, President Feng Yin and Vice President tried their best to remain calm and ordered everyone to retreat to the side of Ji Tianxing and Chao Qingyu. They knew very well that these 3 foreign dignitaries had extraordinary strength and were not afraid of the 7-colored divine fire. As expected, more than 20 godly sovereigns surrounded Ji Tianxing and the other 2. Even if a large amount of rainbow divine fire surged towards them, Chao Qingyu and Yang easily refined it. When the 4 dark red fire demons saw that everyone was gathered together and it was difficult to attack, they wanted to dive back into the sea of lava and find another opportunity to launch a sneak attack. However, Ji Tianxing would not give them a chance. Heaven capturing dragon claw. Ji Tianxing formed a divine art with both of his palms, releasing a boundless amount of divine power. He released 4 gigantic golden palms, grabbing towards the 4 fire demons. Bang, 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 bang. Each of the fire demons had the strength of a high-level divine lord and they were unable to escape from the dragon claws even though they tried their best to escape. They were caught before they could dive into the sea of lava. However, their bodies were special. Their bodies were like jelly and plasticine and they could change shape and expand at will. Even though they were caught by the dragon claws, they tried their best to shrink and elongate their bodies, trying to escape through the gaps between the dragon claws. Ji Tianxing frowned and controlled the 4 dragon claws to seal the power of the fire demons. He squeezed them into a ball and pulled them back to him. Swish, 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 swish. The 4 fire demons shrank to the size of a water tank and floated in front of Ji Tianxing like a red crystal ball, unable to move anymore. Ji Tianxing, Chao Qingyu and Yang sized them up, but President Feng Yin and the other divine lords were frightened and quickly hid far away. Before Ji Tianxing asked, President Feng Yin took the initiative to introduce, "Young Master Ji, you must be careful of those fire demons. They are very cunning. These fire demons are not only powerful and can control the 7-colored divine fire, but their bodies also contain deadly poison. Once touched, it will be fatal. There are not many fire demons and they all hide in the vast sea of lava, so you will not encounter them often. However, once they appear, they will often cause great damage to the major factions and easily kill many divine lord experts." Ji Tianxing nodded slightly and did not say anything. He continued to observe the bodies of the fire demons. Yang had a look of disdain and did not take President Feng Yin's words to heart. He even reached out his left hand and grabbed a fire demon in his palm, kneading and crushing it without restraint. "Do you think these little things can threaten me? I think they are suitable as crystal balls. I will play with them when I am free. They feel pretty good." As he spoke, he grabbed another fire demon and kept kneading the 2 crystal balls in his palm. The 7-colored divine fire and the deadly poison did not exist to him. Seeing this scene, President Feng Yin and the 20-odd divine lords widened their eyes in shock as they exclaimed, "Heavens, isn't Isn't he too powerful? Those are fire demons that strike fear into the hearts of countless divine lord. He actually treats them like toys and plays with them in his palm. Oh my, those fire demons probably did not expect that they would end up in such a humiliating state, right? In the past, we could not afford to offend the elusive fire demons. Now, the fire demons have encountered someone they cannot afford to offend. Just as everyone was discussing, Ji Tianxing finished observing and threw the third fire demon to Yank. These fire demons are quite interesting. I'll give them all to you. Take your time. Yank naturally took them all. He grabbed the 3 fire demons in his palm like an ordinary person grabbing 3 crystal balls. They fit perfectly. Chao Qingyu was curious and asked Ji Tianxing, "Young master, these fire demons only have the strength of an upper-level divine lord. Do they have any value in keeping them?" Ji Tianxing nodded and explained, "Although these fire demons are a type of ferocious beast, strictly speaking, they are not beasts. After all, they are not made of flesh and blood. The 7-colored divine fire in the lava sea and various precious metals were mixed together. After tens of thousands of years of refining and fusing, they gradually developed spirituality and became fire demons. Although they are not very strong and have to rely on the power of the lava sea and the 7-colored divine fire to kill the divine lords, they are not very strong. However, they have no life and are extremely difficult to kill, so they are very tenacious. Moreover, by burning and refining them with a secret technique, one can extract the essence of the 7-colored divine fire and metals, which can be used as excellent materials for refining equipment. I see. After listening to Ji Tianxing's explanation, Chao Qingyu was enlightened. Yank, on the other hand, was alert. He held the 3 fire demons tightly and said to Ji Tianxing, "Young master, you just said that you would give these 3 fire demons to me. I can't take them back." Chapter 3364. Yank was from the rock race. In detail, he had a close relationship with rocks, earth, metal and divine fire. Therefore, he had never thought of killing the 3 fire demons. Instead, he wanted to keep them as pets. Ji Tianxing glanced at him and chuckled, "Why are you so nervous? Although the 3 fire demons are interesting, they are not worthy of my attention." "Then I am relieved." Yank heaved a sigh of relief. He nodded and continued to play with the fire demons. President Feng Yin, Vice President and many Sir Gods were stunned as they watched Ji Tianxing and the other 2 talk. They were shocked and had cold sweat on their backs. What are the realms of the 3 foreign dignitaries? Why do I feel that our president is very respectful to them and listens to them? They are mysterious and no one can see through them. Anyway, they are very powerful. Maybe they are the real experts. Weaklings like us can't understand them. With the 3 foreign dignitaries, we should be safe if we act alone, right? Just as the crowd was discussing and whispering to each other, Ji Tianxing, Chao Qingyu, and the other 2 continued to fly toward Red Rock Island. President Feng Yin and many Sir Gods calmed themselves down and followed them. With the previous lesson, everyone was more cautious. Moreover, they did not dare to fall behind and followed closely behind Ji Tianxing and the other 2. After another 2 hours, they finally arrived at Red Rock Island. It was a reef island with a radius of more than 300 miles. It stood quietly in the lava sea and was nearly 300 feet tall. Most of the island was made up of black and red reefs. That was how the name Red Rock Island came about. In addition, he could clearly see that the undulating reefs were mixed with many colorful colors, flashing with the light of gems and metals. A colorful light shield with a radius of more than 300 miles covered the island like an inverted bowl and sealed the entire Red Rock Island. Seeing this scene, President Feng Yin and Vice President both frowned, revealing a puzzled expression. Strange, why is there a light shield on Red Rock Island? Could it be that someone had already occupied this place? However, which force is so domineering and has such courage and strength? Red Rock Island has always been black and red. Why are there so many colorful areas? Could it be that a large amount of divine stones and metals appeared on this island when the monarch-level divine object appeared and the phenomenon of heaven and earth appeared? Obviously, the Red Rock Island had changed significantly compared to 100 years ago. This change was both good and bad. President Feng Yin couldn't make up his mind. He looked at Ji Tianxing, hoping that he could make a decision. Ji Tianxing had already used the mystic art of God's eye to observe the situation on the Red Rock Island. Just as Wind Yin had guessed, Red Rock Island had already been occupied by a certain force. The God-sovereign experts of that force were busy excavating the rock strata, plundering divine stones and metals. However, this did not affect Ji Tianxing at all. His target was the purple flame divine rock and the king-grade divine object that had appeared not long ago. Let's go in and have a look. Ji Tianxing waved his hand and led Chao Qingyu and Yank to the Red Rock Island. Although President Feng Yin, Vice President, and the others were nervous, they still followed. After all, the existence of Ji Tianxing and the other two was their greatest reliance. It gave them great confidence. Swoosh! They landed on the Red Rock Island and stood above the colorful light shield. Ji Tianxing didn't need to do anything. Yank raised his right hand and slammed it down with 50% of his strength. Crack! A crisp cracking sound could be heard as a large crack appeared on the incomparably thick five-colored light barrier. The god-sovereigns of the Wind Yin Society were dumbfounded and shocked. Oh my god, that is a top monarch-level defensive array. How did he split it apart so easily with just a casual palm strike? Originally, I was thinking that we could observe and learn from that guest elder when he cast a spell to break the formation. I didn't expect him to break the array in such a simple and violent way. As the saying goes, one force can break everything. For experts like them, everything is easy. While the god-sovereigns were still discussing, Ji Tianxing and the other two had already passed through the crack and flew into the colorful light shield. President Feng Yin and the god-sovereigns quickly followed and observed the situation on the Red Rock Island. After flying for more than 30 miles, they gradually saw the situation on the Red Rock Island. It turned out that the colorful area on the surface was all ores that contained rare metals and divine rocks. Countless colorful ores were scattered on the island in long strips and formed 3 mineral veins that were 100 miles long. Of course, the colorful ores that were exposed on the ground were only a small part of the mineral veins. Most of the ores were still hidden in the black and red rocks and underground. Other than the 3 mineral veins, there were sporadic ores, divine gold, and gems all over the island. They were all monarch-level upper-grade and supreme-grade materials. Seeing this, the god-sovereigns of the Wind Hidden Society were extremely excited and cheered excitedly. Ha ha ha! We are rich! 3 mineral veins. How many ores can we mine and how many top-grade divine rocks, gems, and metals can we smelt? This is a huge fortune. If we mine the 3 mineral veins, our wealth will at least increase by a few times. We have entered the abyss several times and been to the Red Rock Island several times, but we have never seen such rich resources. What a surprise! With a huge amount of wealth and resources in front of them, the god-sovereigns of the Wind Hidden Society were extremely excited. However, the god-sovereigns who had occupied the Red Rock Island in advance were already alarmed. Swoosh! Swoosh swoosh swoosh! Dozens of divine lights lit up in all directions and came as fast as lightning. Soon, they surrounded Ji Tianxing and the others. They could only stop and gather together, looking at the god-sovereigns warily. There were more than 70 god-sovereigns who had gathered around them. Most of them were middle-aged god-clan members who were burly and looked stern. These god-sovereigns were wearing standard dragon-patterned armor and they were all above level 5 god-sovereign realm. Most of them were middle god-sovereigns, but there were 20 upper god-sovereigns. There were also 2 god-clan men in golden robes with golden dragon patterns embroidered on the lapels. They were obviously the leaders of the god-sovereigns. One of them was a young man with a dignified appearance. He was wearing an exquisite and luxurious divine crown and he was at level 9 god-sovereign realm. As for the other middle-aged god with a full beard, he had a noble temperament and a graceful appearance. He was actually a peak Sir god. More than 70 god-sovereigns in armor were holding spears and swords as they formed a circle. The 2 men of the god clan in luxurious clothes walked to the middle of the encirclement, arrogantly sizing up Ji Tianxing's group. Who are you? How dare you trespass on the Red Rock Island? Don't you know this is my territory? Chapter 3365. This king. Ji Tianxing and President Feng Yin frowned at the same time. President Feng Yin's heart skipped a beat as he felt something was amiss. He had been following the three godly kings for the past few days and had witnessed the terrifying strength of a godly king. As a result, when he heard the words "this king," he subconsciously thought that the graceful middle-aged man with a full beard was also a godly king expert. However, when Ji Tianxing said the two words, he had a playful smile on his face. "Which kingdom's royal family are you from?" President Feng Yin only came back to his senses after Jiang Yi's reminder. After taking a closer look at the middle-aged man, President Feng Yin realized that he was only a peak godly monarch and not a godly king expert. When he thought of this, he heaved a sigh of relief and felt more at ease. Since he wasn't a godly king expert, he must be a king of some kingdom. The Golden Dragon region had 12 empires and over 100 kingdoms. There were too many kings. Even if the other party had a large number of people, there was nothing to be afraid of as Feng Yin had 3 guest elders present. Therefore, President Feng Yin calmed himself down and stared coldly at the middle-aged man. He said in a deep voice, "You are too overbearing. The Red Rock Island is an ownerless land where all the experts can come. When did it become your territory?" The middle-aged man was stunned. He didn't expect President Feng Yin to not be afraid and even dare to talk back to him. The dragon-robed youth was also stunned. He looked at President Feng Yin with pity and shook his head and sneered. The middle-aged man straightened his sleeves and looked at President Feng Yin arrogantly. He scolded, "Old man, do you know who this king is? How dare you talk to this king like this? Are you tired of living?" President Feng Yin couldn't tolerate or back down in front of so many godly monarchs. He sneered, "This king is from the Gari Yi Empire and is the president of the Feng Yin Society. This king would like to know which kingdom's king are you from? How dare you be so overbearing?" "Overbearing?" The middle-aged man raised his eyebrows and laughed. "Ha ha ha. You are right. Overbearing is a synonym for this king. This king is the king of war of the Golden Dragon Empire, the hereditary king of war." "What? The warlord of the Golden Dragon Empire?" President Feng Yin's expression changed on the spot. His eyes widened, and he couldn't help but exclaim in a trembling voice. You're the elder brother of the Golden Dragon Emperor, the warlord who stirred up chaos in half of the Golden Dragon region, the one who killed millions of people?" Probably due to the shock and fear in his heart, Wind Hidden's voice trembled and his tone changed. The vice-chairman, the left and right protectors, and a few elders whispered to each other for a while. Their expressions changed drastically, and they were filled with shock. Lord Jean stroked his beard and sneered, "That's right, I am Lord Jean. Looks like you're not that ignorant, old man. You've heard of this prince's name. As for killing tens of millions of people, that's just hearsay and malicious slander. This king will punish you." President Feng Yin's body stiffened, and he forced a smile onto his ugly face. He cupped his hands and bowed. "This old man has heard of Lord Jean's great name, but I've never had the chance to meet you. This is the first time I've seen you, so I've offended you. I hope you'll be magnanimous and not bicker with this old man. Since Lord Jean came to Red Rock Island first and set up a sealing formation here, there's always first order. First come, first served. This old man would never dare to compete with the war monarch." President Feng Yin smiled and bowed to Lord Jean. However, he didn't mention the matter of killing tens of millions of people. He clearly didn't want to anger Lord Jean. Lord Jean frowned, and his eyes flashed with disdain. He roared, "Since you know how powerful this king is, why don't you kneel and admit your wrongs? Then get the hell out of Red Rock Island. Don't waste this king's time." The dragon-robed youth's face was also full of disdain. He sneered mockingly, "A bunch of spineless trash. What are you standing around for? Royal uncle is in a good mood today, so you're lucky to keep your worthless lives. If you dilly-dally any longer, this king will slaughter all of you and feed you to the dogs." Such arrogant words humiliated the Sir Gods of the Hidden Wind Society. Their faces turned red and they were both embarrassed and angry. However, they could only suppress their anger and didn't dare to retort. President Feng Yin was also in a dilemma. He was full of hesitation and was anxiously thinking about what to do. At this moment, Yank couldn't hold back his anger and killing intent. He roared, "Fuck. Which blind dog dares to act so arrogantly in front of me? You must be tired of living. As he spoke, Yank clenched his fists and was about to start another massacre. President Feng Yin shuddered in fright. He quickly rushed over and stood in front of Yang Ku. He advised anxiously, "Calm down. You must calm down. You can't fight. You can't fight. Don't get us killed." Yank lowered his head and glanced at him. He gently swung his ankle and flung President Feng Yin away. Fortunately, Ji Tianxing raised his hand and stopped the furious Yank. He looked at President Feng Yin expressionlessly and asked, "The Zhon Prince is so arrogant and humiliated you to this extent. Aren't you angry at all? You don't even dare to resist." President Feng Yin quickly waved his hand and used his divine sense to send a message. He smiled bitterly and said, "Young Master Ji, you don't know. The Zhon Prince is infamous in the entire Golden Dragon domain. We can't afford to offend him." "Ha ha ha." Ji Tianxing sneered and raised his eyebrows. He asked, "This king wants to know why we can't afford to offend him?" Feng Yin calmed his emotions and gave a brief explanation. The Golden Dragon Empire is the head of the 12 empires in the Golden Dragon domain. Its national strength is boundless and it suppresses the surrounding 12 empires. This is because the Golden Dragon Emperor is the last disciple of the Domain Lord. The Zhon Prince is the Golden Dragon Emperor's elder brother and is loyal to him. He has made great contributions. Therefore, the Zhon Prince is one of the most respected experts in the Golden Dragon Empire. He is very arrogant and overbearing. He is cruel and merciless. He kills people like flies and treats the lives of his people like grass. In the past, 2 empires were dissatisfied with his indiscriminate killing of the innocent. Many experts jointly condemned him. In the end, he caused a shocking massacre in those 2 empires. He massacred several cities and killed at least 10 million people. He even threatened the emperors of those 2 empires. If they dared to slander him again, he would kill those 2 emperors and change the ruler of those 2 empires. This matter caused a huge commotion and almost everyone in the Golden Dragon domain knew about it. Several emperors jointly wrote a letter to the Domain Lord, hoping that the Domain Lord could intervene and punish the Zhon Prince. Who knew that the Domain Lord didn't show up and didn't care about this matter. In the end, the emperors made a big fuss and the Domain Lord sent an envoy to the Golden Dragon Empire to reprimand the Zhon Prince and punish him. Tell me, after this matter, who in the Golden Dragon domain would dare to offend the Zhon Prince? Chapter 3366. Ji Tianxing had reason to believe that the Zhon Prince's evil deeds were far more than this. But due to time constraints, President Feng Yin could only give a brief introduction. From those few words, he understood. No wonder Feng Yin was so afraid of the War Prince. Ji Tianxing looked at President Feng Yin and asked with a faint smile, "It seems like you plan to kneel down and beg for mercy from the Zhon Prince, then run away from Red Rock Island with your tail between your legs." Ah! President Feng Yin's face was red with shame and anger. He nodded and said, "If there is no accident, then this is probably the only way. After all, this old man has to look at the big picture. I can't ruin the 10,000 years of foundation of the Wind Hidden Society for the sake of face and dignity." Ji Tianxing understood the meaning behind his words and guessed his thoughts. He nodded expressionlessly and said, "All right, then you can go." Ah! President Feng Yin was astonished. He muttered with a strange expression, "Young Master Ji, you really, then this old man will go and apologize?" Ji Tianxing's expression was still indifferent. President Feng Yin lowered his head resentfully and slowly turned to leave. He began to brew his emotions. He suppressed the humiliation and prepared to kneel down and apologize to the Zhon Prince. Chao Qingyu silently watched and didn't comment. He sighed in his heart, "This old man is too slick and cowardly. He is used to scheming. This king has already warned him, but he didn't listen. Now, the young master is clearly disappointed and wants to abandon the Wind Hidden Society." President Feng Yin walked to the front of the crowd and faced the Zhon Prince and the dragon-robed youth. He slowly bent his knees and was about to kneel down. At this time, the Zhon Prince waved his hand and coldly shouted with a dark face, "Wait." His face was gloomy and his eyes flashed with killing intent. He pointed at the most conspicuous Yank in the crowd and said, This stone monster seems to be very arrogant. He is not convinced by this king. The bastard who broke the defensive array was also him, right? Old man, this king is in a very bad mood. If you want this king to spare your dog lives, then all of you must kneel down and kowtow to this king 3 times. Furthermore, you still have to chop off the stone monster's 2 arms to appease this king's anger. If you can't do it, then you'll all die here. The first prince will chop you up and feed you to the dogs. This. President Feng Yin's body shook, and his expression became more and more ugly. He really wanted to cry but had no tears. He had seen with his own eyes how strong Yank was. Ask him to cut off Yank's arms? He had no doubt that if he dared to make a move, Yank would break his neck. But if he did not comply, the war prince would kill everyone present and the Hidden Wind Society would be completely finished. Moreover, the young man in the dragon robe beside the war prince was actually the crown prince of the Golden Dragon Empire. This was the Golden Dragon Emperor's eldest son, the legitimate crown prince, and the future successor to the throne. If the Hidden Wind Society showed the slightest disrespect, they would offend the Golden Dragon Empire, and would definitely be eradicated in the future. What to do? President Feng Yin's body stiffened as he painfully closed his eyes and fell into a battle between heaven and man. At this time, Yank's anger had reached its limit and completely exploded. Ha 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 ha. I just killed a group of idiots who were courting death, and I didn't expect another ignorant beast to come to me. Since you're so eager to die, I'll fulfill your wish. Yank was so angry that he laughed. His body burst into flames of anger, and his murderous aura surged out. The war prince raised his eyebrows in surprise and sneered mockingly. Ha 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 ha. You know my name, but you still don't know what's good for you. How dare you provoke me? I really don't know if you're brave or stupid. All Imperial guards, listen to my order. Chop that stone monster into pieces and kill everyone. With the war prince's order, more than 70 Imperial army captains wearing silver armor all said in unison, yes. They all waved their spears and swords, and used their unique skills to besiege Yank. Suddenly, the Red Rock Island shone with divine light and murderous aura. Seeing this, President Feng Yin was filled with despair. He murmured dejectedly, "It's over. The Feng Yin sect is completely finished." The vice president and the left and right protectors rushed over and pulled him far away to hide behind Ji Tianxing and Chao Qingyu. Ji Tianxing and Chao Qingyu had no intention of attacking. Ji Tianxing looked indifferent. Chao Qingyu looked coldly at the war prince and the crown prince. He murmured, "You can't stop someone who wants to die." At the same time, Yank's body was surrounded by flames as he rushed toward the war prince and the crown prince. He waved his fists and released endless divine power, forming 2 mountain-sized flaming fists that smashed toward the Imperial guards. The 2 huge fists were formed by the 7-colored earth core divine fire, and they were extremely powerful. There was even lightning in the fists, as if they were the wrath of the heavens. Before the fists arrived, the terrifying divine power pressed down, causing the Imperial guards to be filled with fear and their movements to become sluggish. Bam! 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 In the blink of an eye, the divine art shadows that were attacking Yang Ku from all directions were shattered by the 2 fist radiances. Even if some of the sword light hit Yank, it was like scratching an itch and did not cause any damage. On the other hand, the 2 mountain-sized fist auras smashed into the crowd and struck more than 20 captains of the Imperial Army. With a loud rumble, the 27 captains of the Imperial Army were smashed into pieces, and their divine bodies were burned to ashes. Of course, their divine sparks were not spared either. In the blink of an eye, they were burned to ashes by the 7-colored divine fire. Fortunately, the war prince and the crown prince had retreated in time, and the Imperial guards had neutralized the power of the fists. The 2 of them were not hit by the fists. Even so, when they saw the 27 captains of the Imperial Army being killed in an instant, they were still filled with shock and fear. Hualala, fragments of divine light, mixed with countless rocks and dust, fell from the sky as if it was raining cats and dogs. The remaining 50 captains of the Imperial Army, the war kings, and the first prince all stood frozen in fear, their faces covered in disbelief. After a long while, the crown prince came to his senses and could not help but gasp. What a ferocious monster! The war prince's face was very gloomy. He forced himself to suppress his shock and glared at Yank. He sneered. "Very well. You monster is very strong. No wonder you dare to go against me. But don't be happy too early. In the entire Golden Dragon domain, no one has dared to go against me and live to this day. The wind-hidden society of the Gari Empire, right? I will remember this. Today's matter is over. You can all get lost." Although the war prince was arrogant and overbearing, he was not a brainless person. Seeing how terrifying Yank's strength was, he did not want to waste any more time. Otherwise, his and the crown prince's lives would be in danger. However, Yank grinned and mocked contemptuously. "I am going to start a massacre and kill all of you. You did not run away, nor did you kneel and beg for mercy. You want us to get lost from Red Rock Island? Is your brain filled with shit?" Chapter 3367. The Jean Prince admitted that Yank was very strong. A wise man knew better than to fight when the odds were against him, so he temporarily swallowed his anger and stopped fighting with the wind-hidden society. However, it was impossible for him to bow his head and admit his mistake, or give up Red Rock Island. After all, his arrogance, and domineeringness had been maintained for thousands of years and had long since been deeply rooted. He didn't think that the other party would dare to do anything to him. However, Yank's attitude was aggressive and even more domineering than him. How could he stand it? He glared at Yanku and said in a cold tone, "Damn beast, how dare you talk to this king like that? Do you want the Hidden Wind Society to be annihilated and not even a chicken or dog will be left alive?" At the same time, the first prince secretly gave an order for the 20 overseer gods who were still excavating the mineral vein to gather at the scene. He also showed the dignity of the Golden Dragon Empire's crown prince and shouted at Fengyin, "Fengyin, do you know what you are doing? The Jean Prince and I represent the Golden Dragon Empire and the entire Golden Dragon domain. Do you insist on going against the Golden Dragon Empire? Do you want to go against the entire Golden Dragon domain? If you leave Red Rock Island now, I can pretend that nothing happened and won't pursue the Wind-Hidden Society's crimes. However, if you dare to provoke me and the Jean Prince again, you will have to think about the consequences." The Jean Prince had always been domineering, so he naturally couldn't back down. However, the first prince was very smart and made an appropriate concession. He didn't want to fight for real. In his eyes, he and the Jean Prince were spiritual jades, while the Wind-Hidden Society were lowly tiles. How could they fight to the death? Their lives were much more precious than the Wind-Hidden Society's. Seeing that the first prince had backed down and left some leeway for both sides, Fengyin was relieved and immediately nodded in agreement. However, Yank didn't waver. He was still full of killing intent and vowed to kill the Jean Prince and the others. In desperation, Fengyin could only ask Ji Tianxing for help. He pleaded, "Young Master Ji, since the Golden Dragon Crown Prince has backed down, why don't we just let it go? The Golden Dragon Crown Prince is right, they are the most respected figures in the Golden Dragon realm. We can't offend them." Ji Tianxing looked at him expressionlessly and said indifferently, "Take the people of the Hidden Wind Society and leave this place." Ah! President Fengyin was stunned for a moment. Then, he nervously asked, "Young Master Ji, don't tell me, you're not leaving with us?" Ji Tianxing didn't answer. He just glanced at him coldly. President Fengyin's body trembled. He could see the coldness in his eyes. Chao Qingyu reminded him through telepathy, "Old man Feng, it's because you think too much and think too much that you keep making stupid mistakes." Young Master's meaning was clear. You can leave. What happens next is not something you have the right to participate in. Moreover, the young master wants you to leave now to protect you. Don't you understand? After saying that, Chao Qingyu walked past him and followed Ji Tianxing to Yank's side. President Fengyin immediately understood their intentions when he saw that the three of them didn't retreat. Moreover, their attitude was very firm and tough. President Fengyin only hesitated for a moment before he made a decision. Retreat. He took the remaining 20 Sir Gods of the Hidden Wind Society and left the Red Rock Island as fast as possible. Although this meant that the Hidden Wind Society would part ways with the three foreign dignitaries. In the future, The Hidden Wind Society wouldn't be able to rely on the three divine kings to gain any benefits. However, if they left the Red Rock Island now, they could at least draw a clear line between themselves and the Golden Dragon Empire. After all, the Immortals could only retreat when the Immortals fought. Swoosh, swoosh, swoosh. With a flash of divine light, President Feng Yin took the 20 Sir Gods and left the Red Rock Island in a hurry. However, Ji Tianxing, Chao Qingyu and Yank were still on the island. They had no intention of leaving. The Zhon Prince and the eldest prince both frowned and stared at them coldly. The people of the Hidden Wind Society have all left. Why are you still here? Are you not from the Hidden Wind Society? Or do you want to betray the Hidden Wind Society and die? Don't forget that there are only 3 of you. The Zhon Prince and I have over 100 Sir Gods under our command. They are all elites of the Golden Dragon Empire. The Zhon Prince was still arrogant and overbearing, while the eldest prince was more rational and calm in his arrogance. Unfortunately, no matter what they said, it was useless. Ji Tianxing pointed at the Red Rock Island under his feet and said expressionlessly, "We are not leaving because there is something that I want here. Although I don't want to waste time, I won't allow clowns to jump around in front of me. I will only say this once. You have only 2 choices. Either leave the Red Rock Island or die here." As soon as he said this, the Zhon Prince was so angry that his eyebrows twitched. The eldest prince also frowned. His eyes were cold as he asked in a low voice, "Kid, are you serious? Think carefully about the consequences of offending the Golden Dragon Empire and the zone leader." Yank's patience had reached its limit. He shouted angrily, "Think my ass. So much nonsense. Go to hell, you little bastard." As he spoke, Yank waved his giant hands and shot out a 7-colored divine fire that covered the sky. It blasted towards the Zhon Prince and the eldest prince with destructive lightning. There were more than 100 Sir Gods in the surroundings who were holding onto their sabers, spears, swords, and halberds. They were ready to strike. Seeing Yank attack, without the Zhon Prince and the eldest prince's orders, everyone roared and attacked. Kill them. Protect the Crown Prince and the Zhon Prince. Many of the Sir Gods used their unique skills and divine powers to attack Yank. As they blocked the divine fire, they used their divine powers to attack. More than 20 Sir Gods formed a barrier in front of the Zhon Prince and the eldest prince. In the next moment, the entire Red Rock Island was shaking with a series of muffled bangs. The divine abilities cast by the divine lords were all destroyed by the divine fire that filled the sky. Endless divine light shards burst out in all directions. The 7-colored divine flames poured down like a torrential flood, and the pitilessly violent lightning struck many divine sovereigns. In the blink of an eye, more than a dozen Sir Gods were engulfed by the divine fire. Their bodies were charred black and their limbs were broken by the lightning. However, the Zhon Prince and the eldest prince were unharmed. They were furious. They took out their Kenshin weapons and used their most powerful unique skills to attack Yank. He watched as more than 80 Sir God experts joined forces to attack Yang Ku. Yang Ku's various mystiques were neutralized by the joint forces of the crowd. Chao Qingyu attacked decisively. He waved his dark blue divine sword and joined the battle. Divine sword aura covered the sky. The combination of 2 divine kings was indeed extraordinary. Not only did an invisible power cover the entire Red Rock Island, but it also suppressed all the Sir Gods. The divine fire, lightning, and sword flashes that filled the sky completely suppressed the attacks of the Sir Gods. They were beaten to a pulp and suffered heavy casualties. Chapter 3368. The 2 sides weren't at the same level, so there was a huge difference in power. Yank was a middle divine king, so he only needed to spend some time and effort to defeat the War Prince and hundreds of divine emperors. But after Chao Qingyu joined the battle, it was much easier for him and he saved a lot of time. In addition, although Ji Tianxing didn't attack, he secretly released an invisible power that covered the entire Red Rock Island. The War Prince, the Crown Prince and hundreds of divine emperors were suppressed. Their movements were slowed and their divine power was blocked. They could only use 50 to 60% of their power. Under such circumstances, the battle became a one-sided massacre. In just 15 minutes, more than 50 divine emperors were killed by Chao Qingyu and Yank. The shockwaves from the battle between the two sides shattered the defensive formation that sealed Red Rock Island. The multicolored divine power shockwaves spread out in all directions. They rushed out of Red Rock Island and stirred up huge waves in the lava sea. The lava sea within a few thousand miles was boiling. The seven-colored divine fire was also extremely violent. After President Feng Yin and the 20 divine emperors left the Red Rock Island, they didn't want to go too far. They stopped above the lava sea 3,000 miles away from the Red Rock Island and watched the battle from afar. President Feng Yin didn't want to leave just like that. He wanted to see the result of the battle. He wanted to know the result of the battle so that he could decide what to do next and how to deal with it. However, when the aftermath of the battle hit and the lava sea within a few thousand miles was boiling, he had to retreat 10,000 miles away with the divine emperors under his command. They were 10,000 miles away from the Red Rock Island and separated by the boiling lava sea, so they couldn't see the situation on the island. They could only use their divine senses to observe the situation on the Red Rock Island. But the Red Rock Island was in chaos and the divine power was chaotic. They couldn't see clearly. Seeing this, the vice president and the left and right protectors tried to persuade President Feng Yin. "President, do we still need to watch? They have already fought to such an extent. No matter who wins, the 3 foreign elders have already offended the Golden Dragon Empire. Yes, those 3 fellows are all God King powerhouses. They are fated not to remain in our wind-hidden guild. Since the president has decided to cut ties with them, we should leave this place as soon as possible. Why should we stay here and watch the battle? If the 3 God Kings win this battle, the Golden Dragon Empire will definitely hunt them down. Even the governor will be alerted. When this matter becomes big, our Hidden Wind Society will also be punished by the Golden Dragon Empire. If the 3 divine kings lost, with the War Prince's tyrannical nature, he would definitely kill them. This way, the War Prince and the First Prince will have their hatred resolved, and we will have cleared our ties in time. Perhaps there is still a chance of survival." Not long ago, Guild Master Feng Yin had explained the origins of the 3 foreign officials to everyone. Only then did everyone know that those 3 divine king powerhouses were only temporarily acting as the Hidden Wind Society's guest retainers. Under such circumstances, not only did the crowd not have a good impression of the 3 God Kings, they even felt some hatred for them. Everyone firmly believed that if it weren't for those 3 divine kings, their alliance with the 4 great factions wouldn't have been broken, and they wouldn't have offended the Golden Dragon Empire. Now that Hidden Wind Society had ended up like this, it was all because of those 3 divine kings. As long as the Hidden Wind Society could clear their ties and escape the Golden Dragon Empire's punishment, they would rather the 3 divine kings die on Red Rock Island. Hearing everyone's repeated persuasion, Guild Master Feng Yin's determination wavered. Although he was the president, he couldn't be stubborn. He had to listen to the opinions of the vice president, protectors, and elders. Thus, he nodded and agreed to everyone's request. "Let's leave this place as soon as possible, and we can't be seen by the other factions. As for the result of the battle, I believe that there will be news soon, and we will know when the time comes." Everyone acknowledged the order and hurriedly followed President Feng Yin to fly further away. At the same time, the battle on Red Rock Island was about to come to an end. More than half of the 100 Sir Gods were killed, and only 20 or so people were still fighting. However, the surviving divine monarchs were the same as Prince John and the First Prince. They were heavily injured and covered in blood. At this point, the War Prince and the First Prince no longer hoped to defeat their opponents. They knew that the Rock Monster and the Green-Robed Man were both divine king realm experts. As for the white-robed human youth, he didn't make a move at all. He just watched the battle calmly. That guy was the leader of the Rock Monster and the Green-Robed Man, and his strength was even more terrifying. At this point, the War Prince and the First Prince finally understood why their opponents were so tough and arrogant. Because they had the right to look down on the Golden Dragon Empire. The more they thought about it, the more desperate they became. One of them ordered all the Sir Gods to cover their escape, while the other sent a message jade slip to the imperial family of the Golden Dragon Empire for help. Even if they were to die on Red Rock Island and be killed by the 2 Sir Gods, they couldn't die without knowing why. They had to report this matter to the imperial family and let the Golden Dragon Emperor know. This way, even if they were killed, the Golden Dragon Empire would at least avenge them. The Golden Dragon Empire didn't have the strength to deal with the Sir Gods, and the Golden Dragon Region Master was behind the empire. The War Prince and the First Prince believed that no matter how strong the three Sir Gods were, they couldn't be stronger than the Region Master. Whoosh! With a flash of divine light, a special message jade slip flashed across the sky above Red Rock Island and disappeared in an instant. The War Prince and the First Prince heaved a sigh of relief when they saw that the message jade slip had been sent out. The 20 or so injured Sir Gods didn't have any more worries. They covered the War Prince and the First Prince's retreat with their lives. They were extremely loyal to the Golden Dragon Empire. Even if they knew that they were going to die, they still charged forward without any hesitation. They used their lives to buy time for the War Prince and the First Prince to escape. This move was indeed effective. When there were only 9 Sir Gods left, the War Prince and the First Prince had already escaped to the edge of Red Rock Island. However, it was useless even if they escaped from Red Rock Island. Yank and Chao Qingyu chased after them relentlessly and swore to kill them all. Not long after, the 9 Sir Gods were killed one after another. Only the War Prince and the First Prince survived to the end. They were also covered in blood and looked miserable. They had only flown a few hundred miles away from Red Rock Island when they were stopped by Yank and Chao Qingyu. They had no choice but to stop running. Standing above the sea of lava, they glared at Yank and Chao Qingyu and cursed viciously. "You're really crazy. I'm the Crown Prince of the Golden Dragon Empire. The Empire will definitely take revenge with all its might. If we can't live, you'll die too. We'll all die together. Even if you're very powerful and can kill us, so what? You're already the enemy of the Golden Dragon Empire. The region leader won't let you go either. Even if I die here, you won't be able to leave the Golden Dragon region alive." Hearing their roars, Yank sneered with disdain. "You're about to die and you still have so much to say." Then, he waved his fists and threw out a destructive fist aura. Bang, bang. With 2 loud explosions, the War Prince and the First Prince were smashed into pieces and their divine heads collapsed. Chapter 3369. With the death of the War Prince and the First Prince, the battle was over. Their corpses and shards of Godhead drifted into the sea of lava. Silence returned to the area. Yank clenched his fists and sneered, restraining his killing intent. Ji Tianxing didn't say much, but Chao Qingyu sighed with emotion. If the War Prince hadn't been so arrogant and overbearing, how could he have ended up like this? From this, it can be seen that evil is doomed to destruction. There's always a taller mountain. If you want to live long, you have to keep a low profile. Who would have thought that Yank would shoot him a disdainful glance and sneer? "Low profile, my ass. Those 2 bastards just now dared to be so arrogant without strength. Aren't they just courting death? Only those with strength can be arrogant and not be beaten." Chao Qingyu couldn't be bothered to argue with him. He hurriedly followed Ji Tianxing back to Red Rock Island. On the way, he secretly transmitted his voice to Ji Tianxing. "Young master, although you've subdued Yank, I still feel that this guy is unruly and seems to have some resentment in his heart. He doesn't dare express his dissatisfaction with you, so he's venting his anger on others. If you don't have full confidence, it's best to restrain him, lest in the future." Chao Qingyu wanted to say that if Ji Tianxing were to run into trouble in the future, Yank might take the opportunity to kill him. But he felt that he couldn't say such things, or he would be suspected of sowing discord. Fortunately, Ji Tianxing understood his meaning and replied, "You don't have to worry about that. Yank's life is in my hands, and his life is in my hands. Unless he doesn't want to live, he won't dare disobey me. After all, he's the ruler of a region and has enjoyed great wealth and respect. Now that he's fallen into my hands and become my servant, he's naturally full of resentment. It's fine to let him vent for a while. They're all unimportant people anyway. As time passes, his emotions will calm down, and I will naturally have a way to make him calm down." Hearing this, Chao Qingyu's worries dissipated, and he nodded to show that he understood. Soon, the 3 of them returned to Red Rock Island. Standing in the sky above the Red Rock Island, the 3 of them looked down at the entire island, using their spiritual consciousness to observe the situation on the island and underground. Chao Qingyu took the initiative to ask, "Young master, the Red Rock Island is rich in resources, and the most valuable are the 3 mineral veins. Friends, please prompt, pay attention to the rest of your eyes after reading for a long time." 00 recommended reading. Other than that, the island was also littered with a large number of divine stones and metal ores. "Where do you think we should start?" Ji Tianxing pointed at the ore vein in the southeast and said with a smile, "Share blessings and misfortunes together. That lode is mine. Yank will help me mine it. As for the remaining 2 mineral veins and all the resources on the island, you can all mine as you wish." After that, he woke up everyone in the divine ship and divine tower. Soon, Lin Shui, Blood Illusion God, Gold Left Emissary, Blood Dragon Right Emissary, Nai Feiyun, White Dragon, and Jin Hong all appeared on the Red Rock Island. Chao Qingyu also woke up Lana under Ji Tianxing's instructions. When everyone heard Ji Tianxing's summons, they thought it was an emergency, so they hurried over. Seeing the Red Rock Island under their feet and the magma sea around them, they were a little confused. After Chao Qingyu explained, they understood the reason. Immediately, they were surprised and excited, and burst into cheers. "Oh my God! Such a huge divine stone mineral vein, at least 20 to 30 billion divine stones can be refined. Are you really giving it to us? Young master, you are too generous. The 2 mineral veins are worth at least 30 billion, and there are so many monarch-level materials. It's priceless. We're rich. We didn't do anything when we followed young master, but we picked up a windfall for free. We'll wake up laughing even in our dreams, all right? Everyone, don't just stand there. Hurry up and dig. Don't disappoint the young master's good intentions." After a round of cheering, everyone immediately threw themselves into the excavation work. Except for the mine in the southeast, which was reserved for Ji Tianxing would supervise Yank's mining. The other 2 mineral veins, as well as the scattered divine stones and ores on the island, were quickly distributed. Then, everyone displayed their abilities and used all kinds of methods to quickly excavate the ore veins and divine stones. Although the ground and rock layers were extremely hard, the mining process was a bit difficult. However, it was fortunate that the ground and rocks were hard enough that they were not destroyed by the previous battle. Otherwise, the entire Red Rock Island would have been destroyed by the aftermath of the battle. Everyone was immersed in joy. They worked hard to mine the ores, and their harvests were bountiful. On the other side, Yank was mining under the supervision of Ji Tianxing. The vein that Ji Tianxing had chosen contained the aura of the purple flame divine stone. Friends, please prompt, pay attention to the rest of your eyes after reading for a long time. 00 recommended reading. Although the vein was dozens of miles long and tens of thousands of feet wide, it could produce tens of billions of divine stones. However, there were only a few pieces of purple flame divine stone in the vein. This meant that they had to mine the entire vein to find the purple flame divine stone. Ji Tianxing estimated that with Yank's mining speed, they would be able to complete it in 4 or 5 days. However, Yank's actions and appearance as he mined the vein made Ji Tianxing frown. He waved his palms and condensed divine light blades. He constantly dug the rocks on both sides of the vein and cut the huge ores. All the ores were cut into the size of water tanks and neatly placed beside Ji Tianxing. He was a divine king and had abundant divine power. Cutting rocks and ores was like cutting vegetables. He did not feel tired no matter how much divine power he used. However, this method was too inefficient and time-consuming. Ji Tianxing frowned and observed for a moment. He could not help but ask, "Yank, are you purposely stalling for time in a fit of pique?" Ah! Yank, who was working hard, was stunned. He turned to look at Qin Lai with a puzzled expression. "Why would I be angry? And why am I stalling for time? Did I do something wrong?" Ji Tianxing saw that his expression did not seem to be fake. He reminded him, "Don't forget, you are of the rock race. You rock race have several divine abilities and secret skills that are related to earth and metal. Using your divine abilities and consummate skills, you can travel through the earth, excavate veins, and tunnel much faster than ordinary God race member. Moreover, The rock race also has a very special divine ability and consummate skill that allows them to finish smelting ores and metals in a very short time. Not only can this consummate skill purify ores and metals, it can also separate metals and metals of various attributes. Is there such a thing? Yank showed a very puzzled expression and asked, I know how to travel through the earth, control the power of earth and earth fire. But why haven't I learned the divine abilities of excavating veins, underground tunnels, and smelting ores and metals you mentioned? Are they really as amazing as you say? Ji Tianxing was speechless. He thought for a moment and guessed the reason. I understand now. Your father and the elders of the race have all learned these divine abilities and consummate skills. However, your talent is not high, and you find it too slow to cultivate the important battle skills, so you have not reached perfection. Naturally, your father was unwilling to teach you unorthodox divine abilities like smelting ores and metals that have no destructive power. Chapter 3370. As Ji Tianxing guessed the reason, Yank nodded repeatedly to express his agreement. If my race really has the ultimate skill you speak of, then you should have guessed correctly. Father must have been afraid that I would waste time and energy cultivating an unorthodox divine ability, which would affect my main cultivation method, so he didn't teach it to me. After saying this, Yank thought carefully for a while and asked again, right, when I was at the Divine Lord realm, I already mastered the 5 elements divine Tao laws of earth, fire, and metal. I don't need to use the ultimate skill of my race. Just the power of the 5 elements divine Tao should be able to mine ore veins very quickly, right? Ji Tianxing nodded and explained, using the power of the 5 elements divine Tao to mine ore veins is of course faster than your current stupid method. However, that's only 3 to 5 times faster than your current speed. The ultimate skill of the rock race I'm talking about is more than 10 times faster than your current speed. Moreover, mastering that kind of divine ability will bring about all kinds of conveniences and effects, far more than just smelting ore and metal. It will also greatly benefit you in refining divine artifacts and setting up divine formations. Yank listened attentively and his heart was filled with anticipation. He looked at Ji Tianxing with shining eyes and tried to squeeze out a smile, asking, my father didn't teach me the ultimate skill you speak of. I can't go back to my race's library and look for related secret manuals right now. You know my race very well, and you're very clear about that kind of ultimate skill. Then you should, maybe know the cultivation method of that kind of divine ability. If that kind of ultimate skill could only be used for mining and smelting ore, Yank might not be interested. However, Ji Tianxing said that mastering that kind of ultimate skill would be greatly beneficial for refining artifacts and setting up formations, and had many other special effects. This made Yank very interested and eager to cultivate it. However, he was also very nervous. He didn't know if Ji Tianxing had grasped the cultivation method, and he didn't know if Ji Tianxing was willing to teach it. Therefore, he stuttered when he spoke, and his tone was somewhat lacking in confidence and uncertainty. Ji Tianxing was not surprised. Yank's reaction was within his expectations. Therefore, he stared at Yank with a solemn expression and asked in a low voice, that's the rock race's ultimate skill. How would I know? You're a disciple of the cliff race, yet you're not proficient in the secret arts of your race. You're actually asking me, an outsider? Yank was speechless after being lectured. He was quite embarrassed, and his tanned face was a little red. However, his heart was itching unbearably, and he couldn't help but mumble, that. My lord, you know my clan like the back of your hand. I'm guessing that you have some sort of relationship with my clan. You might even know my father. Therefore, if you have mastered the cultivation method of that kind of divine ability, please do not hesitate to teach me. I will be very grateful. Pausing for a moment, he added, even if it's just a superficial knowledge or a rudimentary cultivation method of that kind of divine ability, I'll be satisfied. At this moment, Yank was no longer as arrogant and haughty as before. He didn't have any of the domineering and arrogant air of a domain lord. In front of Ji Tianxing, he was more like a junior or disciple who was thirsting for knowledge. Seeing that his performance was acceptable, Ji Tianxing finally relaxed and asked with a frown, that's a genuine king-grade divine ability. Once you learn it, you'll be able to move unhindered in the underground world. Who knows how many people want to learn it secretly? If I teach it to you so easily, how do you plan to repay me? Ah! Yank was stunned for a moment. He scratched his head and muttered, I'm now your follower and guard. Isn't that repayment? Bullshit. Ji Tianxing rolled his eyes and said unhappily, how can this be repayment? This is your punishment for losing to me. Yank thought seriously for a moment and said with a serious expression, as long as you teach me that divine ability, I promise I won't hate you anymore. In the future, when you're in danger, I won't hit you when you're down and take the opportunity to bite you. If you don't believe me, I can swear. Ji Tianxing was stunned. He didn't expect that Yank would be so honest and tell him his true thoughts. Moreover, in order to gain his trust, he really raised his arm and prepared to swear to the heavens. Seeing his silly look, Ji Tianxing couldn't help but laugh and wave his hand. Forget it. As long as you can fulfill your promise, there's no need to swear. After he finished speaking, Ji Tianxing closed his eyes and channeled his qi with a solemn expression. After a while, a walnut-sized dark golden ball of light flew out from between his eyebrows and slowly flew to Yank. This golden ball of light was very dazzling and contained a vast and mighty divine power. It was obviously extraordinary. Ji Tianxing looked at Yank and said, that divine ability is called the Earth Golden Cloud spell. It's a king-grade divine ability with dozens of effects and magical uses. The cultivation method of this divine ability, as well as some techniques and tricks, as well as my understanding of this divine ability, are all recorded in this golden ball of light. Quickly refine it and you'll be able to quickly master this divine ability. With your strength and realm, you should be able to learn it within a day. Of course, if your talent and comprehension are higher, perhaps half a day will be enough. Yank stared at the dark golden ball of light, full of joy and anticipation. However, when he heard the last sentence, he couldn't help but feel a little depressed. He was a little depressed and unconvinced. He couldn't help but mutter, I've only cultivated for 10,000 years and I've already become a middle divine king. There's no one faster than me in the surrounding dozens of domains. With this, how can my talent and comprehension be considered bad? Logically speaking, Yank's talent and aptitude weren't bad for him to have such achievements. In the god realm where geniuses and experts were as common as clouds, he was at least a first-rate genius. Unfortunately, Ji Tianxing nodded and said seriously, yes, it's quite bad. Yang Ku felt even more depressed after receiving such a blow. Anyway, my life is in your hands. You can say whatever you want. Also, compared to a mysterious and abnormal guy like you, no one dares to call themselves geniuses. Yank thought silently and didn't dwell on this matter anymore. He followed Ji Tianxing's instructions and hurriedly absorbed the ball of golden light. He sat cross-legged on the ground and focused on refining it. In order to prove that he wasn't mediocre, he was especially focused and worked hard. In the end, he didn't even use a day. In a short 20 hours, he had mastered the Rear Earth Golden Cloud art and successfully learned it. After he finished cultivating, he looked at Ji Tianxing excitedly and said, I didn't use a day. My talent and aptitude aren't bad, right? Ji Tianxing said expressionlessly, that's only 4 hours. You're still far from being a top genius. Don't waste time. Hurry up and get to work. Yank's joy and anticipation were once again extinguished. He could only resentfully use his ultimate skill, shooting out countless strands of golden light into the ground and enveloping the mine. This skill was indeed extraordinary. Under Yank's control, the mine quickly separated from the rock strata and drilled out of the ground bit by bit. Chapter 3371. Originally, the lode was hidden deep underground, sandwiched between hard and thick rock strata. However, Yank used his ultimate skill to control thousands of strands of golden light to wrap around the lode. Under the special effect of divine power, the lode was separated from the rock strata and lifted out of the ground by Yank. Moreover, when the lode was lifted out of the ground, it was quickly smelted by the power of divine power to remove a large amount of impurities. When the lode was completely lifted out of the ground, the original ores were shrunk by 7 to 8 times and became very pure divine stones. The most amazing thing was that the various ores contained in the lode were also smelted separately. There were colorful gems that contained divine power of different attributes. There were also sparkling and translucent divine stones that contained abundant and pure divine power. There were also metals of various colors that were free of impurities and shone with dazzling divine light. Of course, the gems, divine stones, and metals were all cut into walnut-sized pieces by Yank using divine power and piled up neatly in front of Ji Tianqing. Ji Tianqing was quite satisfied with this and finally showed a gratified smile. He put all the gems and divine stones into his spatial ring. Yank was also greatly shocked and curious. He couldn't help but exclaim, "This is incredible. Why didn't I notice before that my race has such a magical ultimate skill?" Under normal circumstances, at least 3 to 4 people are needed to complete the excavation, smelting, and purification of the lode in a short time. I didn't expect that I would finish all the work alone and the efficiency would be more than 10 times higher. After exclaiming, he looked at Ji Tianqing with shining eyes and said, "Young master, you didn't lie to me." Ji Tianqing nodded and said with a smile, "I've never lied. Now that you've just started, when you cultivate this skill to perfection, the efficiency will be increased by another 10 times. Moreover, you'll be able to discover even more effects and magical uses. Of course, don't forget your promise." Yank hurriedly nodded and said solemnly, "Of course I won't forget." After a pause, he asked again, "Young master, you seem to know more about my race than I do. You're obviously a human, so why?" While everyone was happy, he finally asked the question that had been in his heart. Ji Tianqing said with a playful smile, "When I can trust you in the future, I'll tell you the reason." "Ah." Yank was a little disappointed and asked again, "You not only have the complete cultivation method of the Earth Golden Cloud technique, you also have a unique understanding of it. Then you must have mastered other skills of my race. You can teach me a few more powerful skills?" Ji Tianqing raised his eyebrows and said, "Of course, I have more powerful skills, but I can't bite. However, you shouldn't bite off more than you can chew. Once you've mastered this Earth Golden Cloud art, I'll consider teaching you other divine abilities." Yanks. However, he understood what Ji Tianqing meant, so he quickly patted his chest and said, "Don't worry, young master. I'll definitely obey your orders and do my best for you." That's more like it." Ji Tianqing nodded slightly and showed an expression that said, "This kid is worth teaching." Yank didn't waste any more time and continued to use his skills to excavate and refine the ore veins. His progress was very fast. On average, he could excavate half a mile of ore veins in 2 hours and refine more than 30 million pieces of godstones, gems, and metals. At this speed, he could finish excavating more than 30 miles of ore veins in 3 days. Apart from the purple flame godstones in the ore veins, Ji Tianqing's resources and treasures were worth at least 10 billion. Not far away, Chao Qingyu, Lin Shui, and the others were also busy excavating the ore veins. They divided up the work. Some used the power of the 5 elements to excavate and divide the ore. Some used divine furnaces, cauldrons, and arrays to refine and purify the ore to obtain pure gems, godstones, and metals. Under normal circumstances, this was a more efficient way of mining. But even so, with so many people, it would take them 5 to 6 days to finish excavating the 2 ore veins. At first, everyone was secretly laughing when they saw that Yank was very clumsy and used a very primitive way to excavate the ore veins. However, after receiving Ji Tianqing's guidance and cultivating for a day, Yank suddenly showed his prowess. Chao Qingyu, Lin Shui, and the others were dumbfounded. After observing for a while, everyone exclaimed in disbelief and whispered to each other, "Oh my God! How did Yank suddenly become enlightened? He was very clumsy before, but now he has become a mining machine. His efficiency is so amazing. Did you see that? He completed the excavation, refining, purifying, and dividing work alone at a frightening speed. He cultivated for a day and seemed to have become a different person. This must be the young master's guidance. Yes, yes, yes. Yank is not a genius. It must be the young master's guidance that made him so powerful. Yank is a stone, the kind that is stupider than wood. Only a godly person like the young master can create miracles. Since the young master has mastered the magical mining skills, why didn't he do it himself? Instead, He imparted the ultimate skill to Yanku and let Yanku perform the divine ability. Nonsense, isn't it? White Dragon could not help but roll his eyes. My master is the master, and Yank is the servant. How can the master do the work himself? Besides, my master has put in a lot of effort to cultivate Yank and take the opportunity to teach him. Do you think everyone is so lucky? If you don't believe me, you can try. Lin Shui, Chao Qingyu, Blood Dragon, and the others were not convinced when they heard that. Everyone ran to Ji Tianxing eagerly and offered to help him excavate the ore veins. Ji Tianxing looked at them strangely and waved his hand to drive them away. Why are you here? Why are you here? Go away. However, everyone was thinking about the skills and Ji Tianxing's teachings. They could not be driven away. Ji Tianxing could only tell them the truth. The skills I taught Yank are the special skills of the rock race. You are not from the rock race. Why are you making a fuss? Everyone came to a sudden realization and could only leave resentfully. Seeing that everyone had returned to mining, White Dragon laughed gloatingly. See, I told you. You don't have the luck, do you? Everyone rolled their eyes at him. Unknowingly, 2 days passed. Yank diligently excavated the ore veins. He honed the Earth Golden Cloud technique in hard work to improve his understanding and strength. Early in the morning, he suddenly stopped mining. He pointed at a purple-red area embedded in the vein and cried out in surprise. Young master, come and see. The ore in this area is very strange. Not only is it 10 times harder than other ores, but it also contains special divine power. Without waiting for him to finish, Ji Tianxing walked up to the ore. After looking down at it, a gratified smile appeared on his face. It's finally born. With this purple flame divine stone, this trip was worth it. Chapter 3372. Without a doubt. The purple-red ore in the vein was Ji Tianxing's target, the purple flame divine rock. Of course, the ore was as big as a millstone, and there were impurities and other metal ores in it. After being smelted and purified by Yank, the real purple flame divine rock was only as big as a watermelon. Yank tactfully cut it into a dozen pieces and presented them to Ji Tianxing with both hands. Ji Tianxing put the purple flame divine rock into his spatial ring and thought to himself, with so many purple flame divine rocks, the purple flame silver strands refined from them will not only be enough to upgrade the sword of burial of heaven, but also have leftovers. Thinking of this, he thought to himself, after the sword of burial of heaven is upgraded to king grade, I'll have enough materials left. Then I'll refine another set of king-grade armor. Or maybe I can help Yarrow, Ku, Wushuang, and the others upgrade their origin stones to king-grade as well. After all, if I don't add any king-grade materials into a natural-grade divine weapon, the limit is to reach the monarch grade. While Ji Tianxing was still thinking, Yank stopped mining the vein. Seeing this, Ji Tianxing couldn't help but ask, Yank, why did you stop and look at me? Yank answered without hesitation, Sir, haven't we found the purple flame divine rock you're looking for? Our mission is complete. Ji Tianxing couldn't help but roll his eyes. Of course it's better to have more king-grade materials like this. Since there's a large piece of purple flame divine rock in this vein, it's very likely that there's a second one. Don't just stand there, keep mining. Ah. Okay. Yank nodded resentfully and could only continue to use the Earth Golden Cloud technique to mine the vein. He didn't know if Ji Tianxing was too lucky or if the heavens were watching over him. After a short 20 hours, Yank had indeed mined another piece of purple-red ore. However, this particular piece of ore was much smaller than the previous one. After smelting and refining, only 5 fist-sized purple flame divine stones were obtained. Even so, Ji Tianxing was satisfied with the outcome. After another half a day, Yang Ku had finally finished mining the entire vein of ore. In Ji Tianxing's interspatial ring, there were more than 10 billion worth of godstones, gems, and metals, as well as 20 purple flame godstones. He looked at Yank and asked, What do you think? You must be tired after mining for so many days, right? Do you want to rest? Yank waved his hand and exclaimed, No need to rest. If I had used the same mining method as before, I would definitely be tired now. But after using the Earth Golden Cloud art for 4 consecutive days, not only did I not feel tired, I felt like I was full of energy and my strength had increased. Young master, this divine ability is indeed extraordinary. The experiences, tricks, and understandings you've imparted to me are enough for me to figure out and digest for a very long time. Ji Tianqing nodded slightly and said with a playful smile, "Do well, there will be even more exquisite divine abilities in the future." Okay. Yank was full of energy and his heart was filled with anticipation. Unknowingly, his resentment and contempt towards Ji Tianqing had vanished like smoke into thin air. Now, he did not feel that following Ji Tianqing was a disgrace. Instead, he was enjoying it. If Ji Tianqing set him free, he could choose to stay or leave. If it was in the past, he would have chosen to leave without hesitation. But now, he would not hesitate and weigh the pros and cons. He wanted to follow Ji Tianqing and understand the relationship between Ji Tianqing and the Stoneskins. He also wanted to learn more divine abilities from Ji Tianqing. "Let's go and see how they are doing." Ji Tianqing saw that Yank was in a daze and called out to him and flew towards Lin Shui and Chao Qingyu. Yank came back to his senses and hurriedly followed. At this moment, Lin Shui, Chao Qingyu, and the others were still working hard. Fortunately, the mining of the 2 mineral veins had entered the final stage and there was not much left. Everyone had gained a lot and each of them had at least received a few billion worth of resources. Even after working for a few days, they did not feel tired and were still enthusiastic. Under Ji Tianqing's instructions, Yank also joined the mining work and helped everyone mine the mineral veins. As a result, the time taken was greatly reduced. In just 12 hours, the mining of the 2 mineral veins was completed. Ji Tianqing released his divine sense and carefully checked the Red Rock Island. After confirming that there were no mineral veins underground and that there were only scattered paragon stones and gemstones on the island, the group left. Swoosh! Swoosh! The group flew across the lava sea and headed towards the depths of the lava sea. Their target was another island 100,000 miles away. According to President Feng Yin, there were 9 reef islands in this area and all of them contained rich mineral resources. Most importantly, the rumored king-level divine object had also appeared in this area and was likely to be on one of the reef islands. At the same time, in the imperial city of the Golden Dragon Empire. This majestic city with a history of 10,000 years and a radius of 1,000 miles was usually very lively. Although it was late at night, the entire imperial city was brightly lit and filled with people. However, unlike the bustling atmosphere of the city, the imperial palace was heavy and depressing, as if covered by a thick haze. Deep in the imperial palace, in the study of the Golden Dragon Emperor, a tall and burly middle-aged Protoss with a square face, wearing a dark golden dragon robe and a crown, was sitting at the desk, frowning and deep in thought. Even though the study was brightly lit, the middle-aged Protoss, who exuded an air of dignity, exuded an icy aura all over his body. Even the 2 imperial guards guarding the door of the study felt cold all over and did not dare to breathe. At this time, the commander of the imperial guards, who was as sturdy as an iron tower, stepped into the study room, wearing gilded divine armor. "Greetings, Your Majesty." The governor of the imperial army bowed respectfully. The emperor of the Golden Dragon Empire looked up and asked expressionlessly, "Have you found anything? Is there any news of the Crown Prince and Prince John?" The commander bowed and did not dare to stand up. After a moment of silence, he replied in a low voice, "Your Majesty, I have sent more than 100 imperial guards and used all the secret agents and intelligence organizations, but I have not been able to find the whereabouts of the Crown Prince and Prince John." The imperial guards went to the Golden Dragon Abyss and interrogated the people around the abyss. They all said that they did not see the Crown Prince and Prince John leave. In addition, the 100 imperial guards and imperial guards who followed the Crown Prince and Prince John also disappeared. The study fell silent. As the emperor's face darkened, the temperature became colder. His brows were tightly knitted and his eyes were cold. He asked in a cold voice, "So the Crown Prince and Prince John have not come out after entering the abyss? Have all of them disappeared after they sent me a message?" The commander could only nod. Yes. The emperor of the Golden Dragon Empire took a deep breath. His eyes were even colder and filled with killing intent. He gritted his teeth and asked, So my most loyal brother and most beloved and most outstanding eldest son have all died in the Golden Dragon Abyss. Chapter 3373. The Golden Dragon Emperor's question made it difficult for the commander to answer. Although his rationality told him that he could not answer too directly. Even if he knew that the Crown Prince and Prince John were dead, he had to leave some leeway in his words. He had to say that nothing was absolute and that there might still be a glimmer of hope, but the commander understood the Golden Dragon Emperor's personality. He had always been overbearing, direct, and cold. He did not like to feign civility and beat around the bush. If he answered like that, the emperor would most likely be unhappy and might even take his anger out on him. Thus, the Imperial Army governor braced himself and nodded. Yes. Bang. The Golden Dragon Emperor's anger exploded. He stood up and smashed the divine jade desk in front of him. The divine jade shards flew everywhere and smashed onto the ground and walls. The governor of the Imperial Army was also hit by more than a dozen pieces of gravel. But his body stood on the spot like a javelin. Not only did he not dare to dodge, he did not even dare to move. The Golden Dragon Emperor was unable to restrain his anger. His chest rose and fell rapidly. His entire body was surrounded by blood-red flames of killing intent. What a Gari Empire! What a wind-hidden society! They are actually so arrogant. Where are the Imperial Guards sent to the Gari Empire? Immediately send an order to kill their way into the headquarters of the wind-hidden society. Kill everyone alive. Leave no one alive. Yes. The commander quickly cupped his fists and bowed, indicating that he would do as he was told. But he hesitated and reminded, "But, Your Majesty, the elite forces of the Wind-Hidden Society have not returned to the Gari Empire. They are still in our country." The Golden Dragon Emperor shouted angrily, "Then send another batch of Imperial Guards to kill the main forces of the Wind-Hidden Society." The governor of the Imperial Army replied, "Yes, sir." After a pause, he carefully asked, "Your Majesty, the culprits who murdered the Crown Prince and Prince John are 3 guests of the Wind-Hidden Society. They are suspected to be Divine King experts. I have sent the Imperial Guards to investigate. No one saw them leave the Golden Dragon Abyss. I think they should still be in the abyss." The Golden Dragon Emperor took a few deep breaths to suppress his anger and killing intent. He gradually regained his calm. He gritted his teeth and said, "No matter who those 3 bastards are or how strong they are, they dared to kill my Crown Prince and elder brother. That is an unpardonable crime. No matter what method is used, we must capture them, tear them into 1,000 pieces, and burn their bones to ashes." The Imperial Army governor was silent for a moment before he reminded in a low voice, "Your Majesty, I understand your feelings very well. I can't wait to chop those 3 bastards into pieces. However, they were divine kings after all. And within our empire, there are no divine king powerhouses. I'm afraid it'll be hard to contend with them." The Golden Dragon Emperor was still fuming, and he glared at Tang Wulin as he roared, "Bastard! Are you confused? Naturally, there are no divine king powerhouses under my command, but we have the Region Lord behind us. He is the ruler of the Golden Dragon region. After such a huge incident, 3 God Kings actually came to the Golden Dragon region to flaunt their prowess and start a massacre. How can the Region Lord just sit by and watch?" The Imperial Army governor hurriedly nodded and bowed in apology. "Your Majesty is right." This old official was muddle-headed. The Golden Dragon Emperor thought to himself for a moment before issuing an order, "Gather 200 Imperial Guards and head to the Golden Dragon Abyss right away. Find those 3 as soon as possible. Don't ask to kill them. Just keep them occupied and don't let them escape. I'll bring another 100 Imperial Guards and head to the Golden Dragon Abyss. As for the Region Lord, I'll personally send him a message jade slip and ask for his help." The Imperial Army governor bowed with a solemn expression. After acknowledging the order, he lowered his head and excused himself. The study returned to silence. Only the Golden Dragon Emperor remained. He took out a special dark golden message jade slip. His heart was heavy, and he choked with sobs as he typed a message into the jade slip. "Master, Master, please ask for help. Something bad has happened. 3 foreign divine kings had charged into the Golden Dragon Empire in an aggressive manner and were wantonly massacring the innocent. They learned that a large number of divine lords had gathered in the Golden Dragon Abyss, so they rushed there and slaughtered the innocent. My son and elder brother also led the Imperial army to explore the abyss. They couldn't stand the sight of those 3 divine kings wantonly slaughtering the innocent. They wanted to protect the innocent, so they decided to help. Who would have thought that those 3 bastards would be so vicious? They actually killed my son and elder brother, and they even threatened to destroy the Golden Dragon Empire. Master, you have to uphold justice for your disciple. The Golden Dragon domain is your territory. You are the absolute overlord. Those 3 bastards are wantonly slaughtering the innocent in the Golden Dragon domain. You can't let them go. The Golden Dragon Emperor, who had been so domineering and cold a moment ago, pretended to be weeping and crying when he sent a message to the region lord. If anyone else saw this, they would have been flabbergasted. The Golden Dragon domain. In a certain paradise. In the sky that stretched for hundreds of thousands of miles, the sea of clouds was as white as a flat land. A gigantic, dazzling, and magnificent divine palace stood in the middle of the sea of clouds. At this moment, in a garden deep within the divine palace, a handsome young man in a silver robe with starry patterns sat under the green parasol sacred tree. He leaned against a beautiful woman in a palace dress and sipped wine from a jug. This young man was a warrior blood god. He looked to be in his 30s, and he had sharp eyebrows and bright eyes. He was extraordinarily handsome. However, there was a hint of arrogance and evil in his long, narrow eyes, and his aura was also slightly gloomy. There was an old saying that said, "One's face is born from one's heart." This handsome young man was definitely not a kind person. As for the beautiful woman in the palace dress, she looked to be about the same age as the silver-robed young man, but she was actually 2,000 years older. At her age, no matter how beautiful she would not be as dazzling and stunning as a young woman. She was like a wine that had aged for many years. She had a unique flavor that new wine could not match. At the very least, the silver-robed young man was unable to extricate himself from his love and longing for her. The 2 of them were drinking and enjoying themselves under the sacred tree. Suddenly, a streak of golden light flew out of the sea of clouds and landed in the silver-robed young man's hand. The silver-robed young man put down his jug of wine and held the golden jade slip in his hand. His spiritual sense entered it to read the message. A moment later, he suddenly frowned and sneered. The beautiful woman in the palace dress raised her eyebrows and asked, "Long-er, who sent you a message? What happened?" The silver-robed young man handed her the communication jade slip and sneered, "How many people in the Golden Dragon realm can send me a message? It's that useless disciple of mine who caused trouble again. He wants me to avenge him." The beautiful woman in the palace dress placed the communication jade slip on the stone table and said with a faint smile, "I don't want to read the jade slip. Just tell me the message." The silver-robed young man smiled and said, 3 foreign god kings broke into the Golden Dragon Empire and killed the young emperor's eldest son and brother in the Golden Dragon Abyss. Chapter 3374. What? 3 foreign godly kings barged into the Golden Dragon Empire? Long-er, such a big thing happened, how can you still laugh? The beauty in palace attire was obviously shocked as she hurriedly propped herself up to sit. The silver-robed youth patted her hand, indicating that she didn't need to panic. "Don't worry, it's just 3 low-level godly kings with shallow foundations. Didn't many godly monarchs run into the abyss to search for treasures recently? Little Crown Prince and War Prince also brought a large group of guards and ran into the abyss to act tyrannically. I reckon that those 2 fellows ran amok again, that's why they provoked 3 foreign godly kings who were also searching for treasures. In the end, Little Crown Prince and War Prince fought fiercely with the other party. After fighting for 2 hours, they were all killed. The emperor's son and brother all died, but he didn't have the ability to take revenge, so he could only complain tearfully to me, his master, and beg me to take revenge for him. The originally complicated matter, after the silver-robed youth said this, it became simple and clear. The beauty in palace attire roughly understood the cause of the matter and couldn't help but frown as she asked, "How many guards did Little Crown Prince and War Prince bring?" "About 100. The silver-robed youth answered without hesitation. The beauty in palace attire frowned as she analyzed. Both sides fought fiercely, 3 godly kings against 100 godly monarchs, and in the lava sea, they actually fought for 2 hours. From the looks of it, those 3 godly kings' strength is sloppy and ordinary, probably not much stronger than me. The silver-robed youth instantly grinned evilly and stretched out his hand to scratch her nose as he teased, "In my heart, although Master's wife is only in the 3rd-degree realm, she's comparable to a middle-level godly king. At certain times, Master's wife is even more powerful than me and can tightly suppress me." Me. Annoying. The beauty in palace attire frowned and stretched out her hand to slap the silver-robed youth's hand away as she angrily spat. "I'm talking business with you, don't talk about such frivolous things. Also, how many times have I told you, don't call me Master's wife, you have to call me Lian. Every time I hear the words Master's wife, I always think of your master, that dead ghost." The silver-robed youth's smile became even more sinister. "TSK, TSK, TSK. Master's wife is really sentimental. Master has already passed away for 12,000 years and you actually still think of him. Unlike an unfilial disciple like me who has long forgotten what he looks like. But then again, although the 2 of us sent him to the Western Paradise, this disciple of mine has always done his best to take care of Master's wife for him. I believe that the old man will definitely be able to rest in peace. Ha 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 ha." The beautiful woman waved her hand and frowned. "Longer. This is our biggest secret. We must keep it to ourselves and never let a third person know. Besides, it's been more than 10,000 years, so don't bring it up so often." "All right, we've digressed from the topic. Continue to talk about your disciple." Although that little crown prince and the war prince had always been bossy and domineering, used to being arrogant and overbearing, it was time for them to suffer some losses and learn a lesson. But it was different this time. They had all been killed, and they had also learned their lesson. After all, the Golden Dragon region is your territory. 3 foreign godly kings are going on a killing spree here. They really don't care about you at all. No matter what, you have to personally make a trip and deal with those 3 god kings. Otherwise, your reputation will be tarnished when the news spreads. The silver-robed young man nodded and said seriously, "Of course. How can I allow others to behave atrociously in this king's territory? However, you have to go together with me. We've been cooped up in this divine palace and haven't gone out for a long time." The beautiful woman in palace attire stood up and pulled his arm. She nodded with a faint smile and said, "All right, then I'll make a trip with you. The 2 of us husband and wife will personally meet those 3 god kings. Anyway, I've been bored for 100 years. To be able to exchange blows with God King powerhouses again, it'll also be good to test the results of my close seclusion these 100 years." The silver-robed young man did not say anything else. Waving his hand, he fired out a streak of white light, condensing a spatial transmission portal in front of him. The 2 people stepped into the transmission portal and disappeared with a flash of white light. For a full 10 days, Ji Tianxing and the rest had been exploring the magma sea all along. Within these 10 days, they explored 6 reef islands one after another, traveling a distance of 500,000 miles. The area and resource reserves of the 6 reef islands were all more or less the same as Red Rock Island. On each reef island, a dazzling 5-colored divine light appeared, shining with the luster of metals and gems. On 4 of the reef islands, there were more or less mineral veins. Such rich mineral resources naturally attracted countless Sir God powerhouses and caused many factions to fight over them. However, the fighting was something that happened not long ago. Now, the 6 reef islands had owners and were occupied by several powerful factions. Ji Tianxing led Yank, Chao Qingyu, Lin Shui, and the rest to search each reef island one by one. If there were only Sir God-level mineral veins, gems, and materials on the reef islands, Ji Tianxing would not be interested. After he searched the reef islands, he would quickly leave and rush to the next reef island. The faction that occupied the reef islands also had a false alarm. If he discovered the aura of a king-level divine object or resources on any reef island, he would occupy the reef island and use all his strength to excavate the king-level divine object. Although the faction that occupied the reef islands was very angry and unwilling to accept the outcome, many Sir God powerhouses even attacked Ji Tianxing and the rest. However, the end result was the same. Yank and Chao Qingyu took action and easily defeated all the Sir God powerhouses. After a great battle and massacre, the faction that occupied the Reef Islands was intimidated and obediently retreated. After 10 days, Ji Tianxing and the rest searched the 6 islands and gained a lot. 4 of the Reef Islands were very ordinary and only had Sir God-level resources and materials. Ji Tianxing let them go. On the other 2 islands, there were king-level divine objects and materials, but they were all occupied by Ji Tianxing. The group stayed on each island for 4 days and excavated all the valuable mineral veins and found king-level divine objects before leaving. Now, Ji Tianxing, like everyone else, had gained a lot. Ji Tianxing obtained a 7-treasure fire lotus. It was a king-level alchemy material and could be used to refine more than a dozen king-level divine elixirs. There was also a 7-fire divine gold that had grown for more than 30,000 years. It was also an excellent material for refining king-level divine weapons. As such, Ji Tianxing had already collected several king-level materials and could reforge the Sword of Burial of Heaven at any time to upgrade it to a king-level divine weapon. Chao Qingyu, Yank, Lin Shui, Bai Long, and the rest had also gained a lot. The group excavated 2 reef islands and excavated 5 mineral veins, obtaining more than $80 billion worth of cultivation resources. Even after everyone distributed the resources, each of them would still obtain resources worth a few $1 billion. With such a rich harvest, the group was full of anticipation for the remaining 3 reef islands. After all, the 3 islands were deeper in the lava sea. The mineral reserves would definitely be richer. Chapter 3375. Just as Ji Tianxing and the others were flying towards the reef island in front of them in a formidable manner. In the depths of the lava sea, 200,000 miles away from them, a divine light suddenly shot up into the sky. The multicolored divine light was especially dazzling, and it also flashed with a dense array of lore divine runes. Even from 200,000 miles away, everyone could vaguely feel an extremely powerful fluctuation of divine power. Seeing this, everyone was stunned for a moment, and then they were pleasantly surprised. Is it a vision of heaven and earth? No, it's not a vision of heaven and earth, but the divine light of a king-level divine object. Great! After more than a month, a king-level divine object has appeared again. Looks like we're destined to make a fortune in this operation. As long as a king-level divine object appears, it's ours. No one can compete with us for it. Lin Shui, Chao Qingyu, Lan and the others were all excited and cheering. Suddenly, Bai Long pointed at the lava sea in front of them and whispered, "Everyone, look. Many people have discovered the light of the divine object and are swarming over." Everyone looked in the direction he was pointing and saw many Sir Gods rushing to the place where the king-level divine object had appeared at their fastest speed. The Sir Gods were in groups, and they were all moving in groups of dozens. Ji Tianxing, Chao Qingyu, and the others observed carefully for a moment and realized that the dozens of Sir Gods belonged to 2 different forces and were divided into 2 groups. "Everyone, don't waste time. Let's hurry over. Don't let those people beat us to it," Chao Qingyu whispered and urged everyone to speed up. However, at this moment, dozens of divine lights lit up above the magma sea in all directions. Swoosh, 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 swoosh. Every divine light had at least 3 to 5 Sir Gods, and they were all rushing toward the group. Everyone looked around and realized that there were more than 50 balls of divine light, forming a huge encirclement that surrounded them. Of course, as the divine light sped over, the encirclement was rapidly shrinking. Seeing this, everyone could only stop moving forward. They all took out their divine weapons and looked around cautiously. Soon, the dozens of divine lights arrived before them and stopped 100 miles away from them. After the divine light faded, a total of 200 Sir Gods appeared. These Sir Gods were all wearing standard silver armor and helmets that covered their faces. Only their eyes were exposed and their faces could not be seen. Every one of them was holding a sword or a spear. They were staring at Ji Tianxing and the others with murderous intent. They were ready to attack. The atmosphere in the field immediately became tense. Chao Qingyu, Shui Lin, Bai Long, and the others all frowned, feeling the pressure. After all, the surrounding 200 divine lords, Their strengths were all 4th-level Divine Lord realm and above. Among them, there were over 160 middle-level Divine Lords, over 30 high-level Divine Lords, and 2 peak Divine Lords. They were 2 tall and burly God Clan warriors in golden armor. Their auras were ferocious. Furthermore, it was obvious that these Sir Gods were well-trained and had great teamwork. Their combined offensive strength far exceeded that of 200 ordinary Divine Lords. The other party was brimming with killing intent. It was obvious that they had come prepared. This was going to be a fierce battle. Ji Tianxing's expression did not change. He was still calm. He looked around calmly and reminded the others, "These are the Imperial Guards of the Golden Dragon Empire. They are here to avenge their Crown Prince and War Prince." The others immediately understood and began to discuss. No wonder their target was so clear. They were hiding in the surroundings and then surrounded us. I was wondering why they were all wearing the same armor. Even the insignia on their collars and sleeves are the same. I knew that the Golden Dragon Empire would not let this go. I didn't expect them to come so quickly. Anyway, we should have left this place earlier. I'm afraid it's a bit difficult now. Yes. If the Golden Dragon Empire wants to take revenge, they will definitely send more Imperial Guards. Numerous Divine Lord realm powerhouses will definitely surge over in an endless stream. Alright, don't worry. Look at how calm the young master is. What do we have to be afraid of? At first, everyone's expression and mood were very grave. Seeing that Ji Tianxing was calm, they were relieved. At this moment, the 2 peak Sir Gods in golden armor stepped out of the crowd. They stared coldly at the crowd and spoke. "Boy, before coming to the Golden Dragon Abyss, I was worried that you would escape. I didn't expect you to be so arrogant that you are still in the Abyss. Since you've already recognized who we are, then you should know why we're here. Stop talking nonsense. Pay with your lives for the Crown Prince and War Prince. Of course, if you know what's good for you, you will obediently surrender. Perhaps you can die in a dignified manner." The 2 peak Sir Gods in golden armor were the governor and deputy governor of the Imperial Guards. They were very powerful and had high status. They knew that Ji Tianxing, Yank, and Chao Qingyu were all Sir Gods. They also saw Lin Shui, Bai Long, and Shui Huan. They were all Sir Gods. However, they were not worried or timid at all. They were full of confidence. After all, they had an absolute advantage in numbers. 200 well-trained and well-coordinated Imperial Guards were sufficient to contend against 3 great Divine King expert. Ji Tianxing glanced at the 2 governors and said indifferently, "I knew you would come for revenge, but I can't do anything about it, so I won't leave." "You want to avenge War Prince? Just the few of you are far from enough. Tell the others to come out." Ji Tianxing had expected that the Golden Dragon Empire would send more than 200 experts. Otherwise, the Golden Dragon Empire would be overconfident and underestimating him, the Divine King. As expected. The governor frowned and sneered. "You are not stupid. You guessed that we have a large number of reinforcements. However, the 200 Imperial Guards under my command are enough to deal with you. This is the territory of the Golden Dragon Empire. As long as His Majesty gives the order, all the Sir Gods will kill you. Therefore, you should surrender and admit your mistakes. Don't be stubborn." The governor led the 200 Imperial Guards to the Golden Dragon Abyss first. The Golden Dragon Emperor and the 100 Imperial Guards followed behind. His goal was not to kill Ji Tianxing and the others, but to delay them as much as possible. Therefore, although the 200 Imperial Guards appeared to be aggressive, they did not want to start a fight immediately. Seeing that Ji Tianxing and the others were calm and not in a hurry to escape or start a fight, the governor was not in a hurry either. He was happy to stall for time. Moreover, he kept repeating and emphasizing that this was the Golden Dragon Empire. Ji Tianxing and the others would be the enemy of the entire empire and would not be able to move an inch. His goal was to persuade Ji Tianxing and the others to surrender without fighting. That way, he would be able to make a great contribution without bloodshed. It would be perfect. Chapter 3376. However, in just a few words, Ji Tianxing had seen through the thoughts of the Imperial Army's governor. Ji Tianxing looked towards the northwest. There was nothing unusual within the range of 10,000 miles. He searched another 40,000 miles with his divine sense and found no other divine emperors. Therefore, he sneered at the imperial army governor and asked, "Ha ha ha ha. Are you trying to fool me? The Golden Dragon Emperor and a large group of divine emperors will come to your aid. But not now. They won't be here anytime soon, right? Even if you have 200 divine emperors, you won't be able to kill us. So, you want to stall for time and wait for the Golden Dragon Emperor to come to your aid, right?" Hearing that, the governor and the vice commander looked at each other in shock. Both of them had the same thought in their minds. Is this guy a monster? How can he know what we're thinking? Their faces were a bit pale. They were about to refute or change the topic. Then, Ji Tianxing waved his hand and gave the order to attack. Kill them. Let's finish this quickly. He knew that once the Golden Dragon Empire started to take revenge, it would be endless. It wouldn't be a problem to break out of the encirclement of the Imperial Guards. But if he did that, the Imperial Guards would definitely chase after him and delay his search for the king-level divine object. The best way was to kill all the Imperial Guards. If he could find the king-level divine object before the Golden Dragon Emperor and his reinforcements arrived, he could leave the Golden Dragon Abyss without regrets. Following Ji Tianxing's order, Yang Ku and Chao Qingyu charged out and unleashed their ultimate techniques and abhina to launch a fierce attack on the Imperial army. Lin Shui, Shui Huan, Bai Long and Nai Feiyun also waved their weapons and performed their secret divine skills. Swish, 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 swish. All of a sudden, the colorful brilliance of divine spells shrouded the area within a radius of 200 miles. Sword lights and saber lights, as well as all kinds of bizarre divine spells, poured down like a torrential flood. Under such circumstances, even if the Imperial Army governor didn't want to start a war and wanted to stall for time, there was nothing he could do. There was almost no need for him to give the order. The 200 Imperial Army soldiers brandished their Kenshin weapons and launched a coordinated counterattack. Almost all of them used the same divine ability, unleashing tens of thousands of five-colored light blades that slashed toward Ji Tianxing, Chao Qingyu, and the others. The many Imperial Army soldiers worked together to cast the spell. Their coordination was excellent, causing the power of the spell to multiply. Peng peng peng. Rumble. The divine spells cast by both sides collided in the sky with a deafening boom. Countless saber and sword auras, as well as divine arts, were shattered by the collision. Billions of divine light shards burst out and scattered in the sea of lava. A destructive five-colored shockwave spread out in all directions, sweeping through an area of 10,000 miles. Within this region, the sea of magma had been shaken to the point of boiling. Surging waves of fire surged into the sky, releasing seven-colored divine flames that blotted out the sky. Instantly, many Imperial Army soldiers touched the seven-colored divine fire. Their armors were burned until they twisted and large holes appeared. At least 30 Imperial Army soldiers were burned by the seven-colored divine fire. They screamed in pain and had to retreat from the battle. Of course, Lin Shui, Bai Long, Shui Huan, and the others were also in danger. They were threatened by the seven-colored divine fire. Luckily, Ji Tianxing acted in time. He used the swallowing divine power and swallowed the seven-colored divine fire around them. Only Yang and Chao Qingyu weren't affected by the seven-colored divine fire. They fought bravely. The two sides had only fought for a few seconds, but more than a dozen Imperial Army soldiers had been killed by Yang and Chao Qingyu. Even though Lin Shui and God Emperor Shui Huan used all their ultimate moves, the Imperial Army soldiers weren't strong enough. However, the strength of the Imperial Guards was not to be underestimated, and they worked together to cast spells to resist. No matter how hard Lin Shui and God Emperor Shui Huan attacked, they couldn't hurt the Imperial Army soldiers. Instead, they themselves were in a very dangerous situation. Their lives could be in danger at any time. But Ji Tianxing suppressed his worry and didn't ask them to hide in the divine ship. He knew that if they hid and cultivated in seclusion, it would be very difficult for them to increase their strength. Only through life-and-death battles could they strengthen their foundation of the divine path and increase their combat strength. Time passed quickly as they fought fiercely. Deafening explosions and dazzling rays of divine light caused everything within a radius of 3,000 miles to be in chaos. A full quarter of an hour had passed, and the situation of the battle had undergone subtle changes. At the beginning, Yank and Chao Qingyu fought bravely and achieved great results. The two of them severely injured more than 30 Imperial Army soldiers and killed more than 20. But until now, the number of Imperial Army soldiers had only increased by a dozen. The two of them seemed to be in a quagmire and became very slow. The governor and deputy governor of the Imperial Army had led more than 90 Imperial Army soldiers to surround the two of them. The two of them couldn't use any of their strength. No matter how powerful their divine powers were, they were neutralized by the other party as if they were hitting cotton. As for Lin Shui, God Emperor Shui Huan, God Emperor Bai Long, and the others, they were in an even worse situation. More than 30 Imperial Army soldiers had formed a battle formation and attacked them together. The divine abilities and killer moves they used were basically all blocked by the Imperial Army. Instead, the siege of the Imperial Army soldiers caused them great trouble and danger. Now, not only were Nai Feiyun and left emissary Jin injured, but Lin Shui and God Emperor Bai Long were also injured. The battle had reached a stalemate. Originally, Ji Tianxing had predicted that he would be able to finish the battle within an hour. But looking at the current situation, the battle might not end even after another 4 hours. If the battle continued, Lin Shui, God Emperor Bai Long, and the others would be more seriously injured. The slightest carelessness could lead to serious consequences. They would be seriously injured and even their foundation of the divine path would be affected. Moreover, Yank and Chao Qingyu didn't have enough battle experience. When faced with the siege of a large number of Sir Gods and the other party's battle formation, they made some mistakes. Under such circumstances, Ji Tianxing also changed his attitude. He no longer watched with folded arms like before. He asked Chao Qingyu to take out the divine warship to cover Lin Shui, God Emperor Bai Long, and the others. They all retreated to the divine warship to heal and rest. Soon, only he, Yank, Chao Qingyu, and Lan were left on the battlefield. They were besieged by more than 120 Imperial Army soldiers. Only godly king experts like them could ignore the threat of the seven-colored divine fire and withstand the joint attack of so many Sir Gods. Ji Tianxing channeled his energy and cast spells as he instructed Yank, Chao Qingyu, and Lan. Although you are all godly kings and have cultivated for more than 10,000 years, you still don't have enough battle experience. However, your combat experience is still lacking, especially when it comes to large-scale group battles. In a situation where the other party has the advantage of numbers and has formed a battle formation, you can't just charge and retreat blindly. At this time, you have to combine formation and battle. Chapter 3377. In the eyes of the world, a godly king was a supreme expert. They were already at the peak of the godly way. Their comprehension of the godly way laws and the use of various divine powers had reached the acme of perfection. Logically speaking, a godly king expert's combat experience and foundation of the godly way were extremely solid. However, that was only relative to those below the godly king realm. In front of Ji Tianxing, lower godly kings like Lan and Chao Qingyu were nothing. Even a middle godly king like Yank was clumsy. There were too many areas that he needed to learn and improve on. When the three of them heard his guidance, their bodies shook. Then, they were enlightened. At this moment, Ji Tianxing's divine power had reached its peak. He released his ultimate killer move. Watch carefully. Just like this. Ji Tianxing shouted. He held the sword of burial of heaven in his right hand and slashed at the battle formation in front of him with all his might. Heavenly Dragon Slash. The sword of burial of heaven gave off boundless golden light. It slashed out a dazzling dragon-shaped sword that was 10,000 feet long. The golden sword was like a divine dragon. It let out a dragon roar that tore through the sky. It slashed down at the Imperial Army. The battle formation was formed by more than 30 Imperial Army members. It was in the shape of a disc and occupied a radius of 50 miles. Seeing the dragon-shaped sword descending from the sky, everyone looked as if they were facing a great enemy. Their expressions were extremely grave. Without any orders, they all unleashed their full strength in unison. They operated the battle formation to block the attack of the giant sword and tried their best to neutralize the unparalleled power of the giant sword. Kaboom! In the next moment, the gigantic dragon-shaped sword that could split heaven and earth slashed down fiercely, producing a deafening sound. The dazzling golden light drowned more than 30 Imperial Army members. The battle formation that they formed together and the shield that they released were all split in half by the giant sword. The shield shattered, and the sky was filled with fragments of divine light. The battle formation was also split in half. It was destroyed on the spot. Another 18 Imperial Army members were directly killed by the dragon-shaped sword. Not only were their bodies smashed to pieces, but their godheads were also shattered. With one strike, a battle formation was destroyed, and the Imperial Army suffered grievous casualties. Yang Ku, Chao Qingyu, and Lan Er were all dazzled by the scene, their faces filled with astonishment. Chao Qingyu and Lan Er were deep in thought. They roughly understood what Ji Tianxing meant and vaguely found a way to break the spell. Only Yang frowned and pondered. He asked in confusion, "Young master, you're using brute force to destroy the enemy's battle formation. I used the same method before, so why didn't I break their battle formation? Could it be that my divine ability isn't powerful enough?" Ji Tianxing raised his eyebrows and said with a chuckle, "I've long said that your talent and perception are indeed a bit lacking. Could it be that you didn't notice that my sword technique from before didn't just contain over 100 types of divine Tao laws, it even contained the energy of the formation Tao? Moreover, the target of this sword technique was very important. Since the other party had made it clear that they were going all out to defend, you couldn't attack the weak points of the battle formation. This was because the other party would definitely use the power of the battle formation to block your attack and disperse the power. Only by attacking the strongest point of the battle formation, which the other party couldn't disperse or divert the power, could you break the enemy in one strike." After pausing for a moment, he continued to explain, "Of course, this effect can only be achieved if the power of your attack exceeds the strongest defense of the battle formation. If you can't do that, then find the weak points and flaws of the battle formation in the battle. Make use of diversionary tactics and sneak attacks to find a way to break the flaws of the battle formation. After creating a gap in the battle formation, you can gradually expand the results of the battle and destroy the entire battle formation." Ji Tianxing explained it so clearly that Yang naturally understood. Only then did he reveal a look of realization. "I see. Although I'm the lord of a region and have killed countless Sir Gods, I've never fought in a battle like this before. But I have never fought such a battle where I had to face more than 100 divine lords alone. Now that I've listened to your guidance, I've been enlightened." Ji Tianxing pointed at the battle formation formed by over 90 Imperial Guards in the distance and said with a playful smile, "Since you've learned it, let's practice it." Yang's face instantly revealed a difficult expression. He smiled bitterly and said, "Master, isn't this too difficult for me?" Ji Tianxing said expressionlessly, "What are you afraid of? You're a middle divine king. Your skin is rough and your flesh is thick. Even if you get injured, it won't be fatal." Yang could only brace himself and nodded, saying, "All right, then I'll try my best." After saying that, he turned and charged towards the battle formation. He used his strongest abhina with all his strength and attacked the strongest point of the battle formation. Seeing this, Ji Tianxing couldn't help but frown and sigh. Chao Qingyu and Lan Er looked at each other and couldn't help laughing. The result was obvious. Yang's abhina with all his strength couldn't break through the defense of the battle formation. It was dissolved in the blink of an eye. Furthermore, the 2 Imperial Guards and over 90 Imperial Guards took advantage of the situation to launch a counterattack and sent Yang flying back. Fortunately, his defense was strong and he only suffered some minor injuries. It wasn't a big deal. When he returned to Ji Tianxing, he scratched his head awkwardly and smiled embarrassedly. Ji Tianxing shook his head and said in a low voice, "The opponent is a battle formation formed by over 100 Sir Gods. Even I can't break through it with brute force, let alone you. I can only find the weakness and flaw first. I'll show you again. Watch carefully." After saying that, Ji Tianxing held the sword of burial of heaven and rushed to the front of the battle formation in a flash. He was covered in a layer of dark golden divine light. He waved the sword of burial of heaven and rushed into the battle formation. Swoosh, swoosh, swoosh. He dashed left and right, constantly flashing and shooting out tens of thousands of sword auras. His figure was erratic, sometimes to the east and sometimes to the west. He moved freely in the battle formation and no one could stop him. The Imperial Guards couldn't catch his movements or predict his target. They could only be led by the nose. In a short while, over a dozen Imperial Guards were killed by Ji Tianxing. The remaining 80 Imperial Guards were all restrained by Ji Tianxing. They were in a mess and flaws appeared in the battle formation. In the blink of an eye, Ji Tianxing attacked decisively the moment the opening appeared. He teleported to the floor in the battle formation and instantly unleashed his strongest power. He swung the sword of burial of heaven. Swish! Rising sword of life. A dark golden sword aura that was 1,000 feet long swept out like a crescent moon. It was hazy and elegant and contained an ethereal sword will. The sword seemed slow, but it was actually fast. It was impossible to guard against it. Even though the Imperial Guards realized something was wrong and rushed over to stop it, it was too late. Boom! With a muffled explosion, 6 Imperial Guards were swept up by the sword aura and cut in half. A gap was torn open in the originally unbreakable battle formation. Even though this gap wasn't large, Ji Tianxing immediately swung the sword of burial of heaven and used 3 supreme sword techniques in a row. Peng! 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 Another dozen Imperial army soldiers were sent flying and killed by the Heavenpiercer sword. The gap in the battle formation instantly widened several times and could no longer be closed. Yank was extremely excited by this sight. He couldn't help but shout, "Young master is mighty." Chapter 3378. As the ruler of a region, Yank had always been arrogant and reserved. Not to mention worshipping someone, even if he had to admit that someone was stronger than him, it was still a very difficult thing. However, at this moment, he was very emotional and felt admiration for Ji Tianxing. This was because he could tell that Ji Tianxing was sincere in teaching him. He wanted to teach him more battle experience and techniques. Even though the battle formation formed by the 2 Imperial Army governors and more than 90 Imperial Army soldiers was very strong, it was still not enough. Even if Yank tried his best, he would not be able to break it. But Ji Tianxing managed to do it. He used the second method that he had mentioned, which was to combine the power of array formation with his ultimate skill to break the flaws in the Imperial Army's battle formation and gradually expand the flaws. As a result, the Imperial Army's battle formation was torn apart and was about to fall apart. At the same time, Chao Qingyu and Lana rushed over. The couple unleashed their strongest strength and ultimate skill as they bravely charged into the gaps in the battle formation and slaughtered the panicked Imperial Army soldiers. The result was undeniable. The gaps in the Imperial Army's battle formation were widened again. In a short span of 10 breaths, Ji Tianxing forcefully broke open 2 more gaps. As Yank came back to his senses and fiercely joined the battle, the Imperial Army's battle formation was torn apart and quickly collapsed. A complete battle formation was divided into several areas that were not connected to each other and could not take care of the front and back. As a result, the battle formation was broken. And the Imperial Army soldiers had lost the protection of the battle formation and could no longer work together to resist the enemy. Their battle strength was greatly reduced. Faced with the fierce attacks of Ji Tianxing and the other 3, the Imperial Army soldiers were completely unable to resist and were beaten back repeatedly. They suffered heavy casualties. Even with the Imperial Army governor and deputy governor leading a few high-level divine lords to reinforce them, they could not change the situation. Another 15 minutes passed and the battle came to an end. Of the 90 Imperial Army soldiers, only 20 were left. A total of 70 Imperial Army soldiers were killed on the spot. Half of them were killed by Ji Tianxing's sword. Yank and Chao Qingyu killed a lot of them, while Lana killed a lot of them. Such an outcome struck fear into the hearts of the 2 governors and more than 20 Imperial Guards. Everyone no longer had the will to fight, and it was difficult for them to continue. They could only fight as they retreated, fleeing towards the entrance of the abyss. Even though the 2 governors and a few high-rank godlords covered the retreat of the surviving guards, they were still able to escape. However, Ji Tianxing and the other three pursued relentlessly. After chasing them for 10,000 li, they killed another dozen or so imperial guardsmen. Among them were a few high divine lords and vice-governors. Only the imperial army governor and 10 imperial army soldiers were still alive, but they were also covered in wounds and covered in blood. Everyone was stopped by Ji Tianxing and the others. They no longer had the strength to escape. Everyone's heart was filled with despair, as if they had seen the arrival of death. It's all over. You can all die in peace. The Golden Dragon Emperor won't be able to save you in time, Ji Tianxing said indifferently as he looked coldly at the imperial army governor. As soon as he finished speaking, Yank, Chao Qingyu, and Lana waved their divine weapons and used their powerful divine abilities to attack the imperial army governor and the others. The imperial army governor and the 10 imperial army soldiers were dejected. They knew that they were going to die, so they wanted to self-destruct. They knew that even if they self-destructed, they wouldn't be able to kill Ji Tianxing and the others. However, they could rest in peace now that they had caused trouble and serious injuries to Ji Tianxing and the others. At this moment, an angry roar suddenly sounded above the lava sea not far away. "How dare you, thief!" As the powerful and domineering male voice sounded, the imperial army governor and the 10 imperial army soldiers trembled in surprise. Even their dim and lifeless eyes regained their brightness, reigniting the hope of survival. This was because they were all too familiar with that voice. It was the Golden Dragon Emperor's voice. His Majesty had finally arrived to save them. Ji Tianxing, Yank, and the others naturally heard the Golden Dragon Emperor's voice. However, Yank and the others didn't hesitate at all. They even sped up their casting speed and increased the power of their divine abilities. Boom! 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 With a dull explosion, a dazzling divine light and a powerful divine skill struck the imperial army governor and the 10 imperial army soldiers. Their figures were drowned, and their surprised expressions froze. In the dazzling light of the divine arts, blood and flesh splattered, and screams rang out. The 10 imperial army soldiers were killed on the spot. Blood splattered everywhere, and dozens of godhead fragments scattered. Even the imperial army governor's divine body was destroyed. His entire body was split into several pieces, and only his godhead escaped. Whoosh! His godhead streaked across the sky like lightning, exploding with the fastest speed possible as he fled toward the Golden Dragon Emperor. Thousands of miles away, a dazzling divine light enveloped many figures. It was the Golden Dragon Emperor and hundreds of imperial army soldiers. They were also rushing over as fast as they could. The imperial army governor believed that as long as his godhead escaped to the Golden Dragon Emperor, he would be safe. However, Ji Tianxing intercepted at this moment. He swung his sword and slashed out 9 golden sword lights. Swish! 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 The 9 sword auras fanned out and enveloped the imperial army governor's godhead, making it impossible for him to escape. He had just seen the hope of survival, but he immediately fell into despair. The Golden Dragon Emperor in the distance was also furious when he saw this scene. He roared murderously, "You bastard, you're courting death." However, no matter how angry the Golden Dragon Emperor was, it was useless. The imperial army governor's fate was already sealed. He was one step too late. Crack! With a crisp sound, his godhead was hit by the sword auras, and dozens of fragments burst out. The imperial army governor, who was a peak divine lord, was also killed by Ji Tianxing with one strike. He and the 200 imperial army soldiers under his command were all annihilated. The Golden Dragon Emperor saw it with his own eyes. He was so angry that his eyes almost popped out of their sockets. It was formed by extreme anger and murderous intent. After the battle, Ji Tianxing put away the sword of burial of heaven and held it behind his back. He looked at the Golden Dragon Emperor and the others calmly. Yank, Chao Qingyu, and Lana also held divine weapons and stood behind Ji Tianxing, waiting for the Golden Dragon Emperor to arrive. Swish! After a few seconds, the Golden Dragon Emperor and hundreds of imperial army soldiers finally arrived. They stopped 100 miles away from Ji Tianxing and formed a battle formation above the lava sea. Then, Ji Tianxing and the others saw the Golden Dragon Emperor's face clearly. Of course, in addition to the hundreds of imperial army soldiers, The Golden Dragon Emperor was also accompanied by a peak divine lord. It was an elder in a black robe with dragon patterns. His hair and beard were white, but his eyes were bright and full of vigor. He exuded a gloomy and cold aura. This elder followed behind the Golden Dragon Emperor. He wore an ancient crown on his head and held a scepter that symbolized divine authority. He also carried a broadsword that was as wide as a bench on his back. Judging from his appearance, he should be the Golden Dragon Empire's Grand Master or High Priest. Chapter 3379. Of course, Ji Tianxing didn't care how many Imperial Guards the Golden Dragon Emperor had brought with him or who the old man beside him was. He scanned the crowd with his divine sense, but he didn't sense any divine king's aura. Naturally, he stared at the Golden Dragon Emperor and raised an eyebrow. The ruler of the Golden Dragon region didn't come? What's the point of you and 100 Imperial Guards coming? The Golden Dragon Emperor's brows furrowed tightly upon hearing this, and he roared, "You damned arrogant brat. You're far too arrogant. You killed my son and brother first, and now you've slaughtered 200 Imperial Guards. Such a heinous crime, your viciousness and cruelty really make one's hair stand on end. Tell me, how should I punish and torture you to appease my hatred?" The Golden Dragon Emperor's anger and hatred had reached its limit. Even if he cut Ji Tianxing into 8 pieces and split him into 5 clones, he still wouldn't be able to appease his hatred. Perhaps only cutting Ji Tianxing into 1,000 pieces and burning his bones to ashes would be able to appease his hatred. Ji Tianxing's lips curled into a cold smile. "If that's all you've brought, you'll be buried here too, let alone avenging your son and brother. Revenge breeds revenge. When will it ever end? Leave. Don't make any more unnecessary sacrifices." Even though the Golden Dragon Emperor hated him to the core, he didn't hate him. Whether he killed him or not depended on the Golden Dragon Emperor's attitude. Ji Tianxing was still kind and didn't want to kill again. Unfortunately, the Golden Dragon Emperor didn't appreciate his kindness at all. He was stunned for a moment, then laughed mockingly. "Ha ha ha ha. Did I hear wrongly? Are you trying to make peace with me? You must have exhausted all of your divine power in the previous battle, and you must have been seriously injured, right? You don't have the strength to fight against my 100 Imperial Guards. You're already scared. Unfortunately, it's too late for you to beg for mercy. I swore before I came here that I would cut you into 1,000 pieces no matter what. Only then can I appease the souls of the Crown Prince and the War Prince." The Golden Dragon Emperor roared with a ferocious expression. He was very pleased with himself, and killing intent swirled around his body. The black-robed elder and the 100 Imperial Army soldiers all sneered, their eyes cold and sharp. Seeing this, Yank couldn't help but sneer and ask, did that Golden Dragon Emperor misunderstand something? Too naive. Chao Qingyu couldn't help but nod and say, this kind of person is very self-confident, arrogant and overbearing. Their way of thinking is different from ordinary people, and it's hard to change it in a short time. The young master was merciful and intended to spare their lives. Unexpectedly, his first reaction was that we were too weak to fight and wanted to beg for mercy. Ridiculous. Yank, Chao Qingyu, and Lana looked at the Gold Dragon Emperor with pity in their eyes. However, the Golden Dragon Emperor was completely oblivious to this and gave the black-robed elder a meaningful glance. The black-robed old man understood tacitly and immediately waved his hand to issue an order. Surround them, don't let them escape. The 100 fully armed Imperial Army soldiers immediately spread out and formed an encirclement with a radius of 100 miles. Everyone was holding swords and spears, and some were even holding crossbows, aiming at Ji Tianxing and the others. Now that the encirclement had been formed, the Golden Dragon Emperor felt even more confident. He glared at Ji Tianxing and shouted in a dignified voice, "Kid, you can't escape now, even if you have wings. I'll give you a chance. As long as you kneel and beg for mercy and seal your cultivation, I'll give you a dignified death. In fact, I'll only kill you to avenge the Crown Prince and the War Prince. As for your 3 companions, I'll spare their lives." Although he said so, it was only an expedient measure. How could the anger and hatred in his heart be so easily dispelled? However, he also knew that Ji Tianxing and the others were all God King experts. If he really attacked, The other party would fight like a cornered beast and would definitely slaughter many of the Imperial Army soldiers. Even he and the state preceptor might be seriously injured. Therefore, the Golden Dragon Emperor used a conciliatory strategy to persuade Ji Tianxing to surrender. Once he captured Ji Tianxing, he would definitely give the order to kill Yank and the others. Finally, he would use all kinds of torture methods to torture Ji Tianxing. This was the plan he had just come up with. Unfortunately, Ji Tianxing was fated not to cooperate. He looked at the Golden Dragon Emperor with a strange expression and shook his head with a cold smile. I gave you a chance to live, but you didn't cherish it. Since you're so stubborn, don't blame me for being merciless. With that, Ji Tianxing waved his hand and gave the order to attack. Yank, Chao Qingyu, and Lana had been waiting for a long time and were itching to make a move. When they heard Ji Tianxing's order, the three of them exploded with violent divine power and used ferocious killing techniques to charge at the surrounding Imperial Army soldiers. 100 battles God-slaying. 10,000 breezy swords. Falling stars of orchid rain, the three of them waved their divine weapons and unleashed dazzling divine spell brilliance. They unleashed an overwhelming amount of sword light toward the Imperial Army soldiers. The Golden Dragon Emperor's expression changed when he saw that the three of them were still in good condition, full of divine power, and as strong as ever. Didn't you already? How did this happen? The Imperial Army governor and 200 Imperial Army soldiers fought with you for 2 hours, but you killed them all. How can you still have energy left? The Golden Dragon Emperor couldn't understand. Yank, Chao Qingyu, and Lana were clearly in a sorry state with disheveled hair and bloodstains all over their bodies. No matter how strong they should have been exhausted and severely injured after fighting with 200 Imperial Army soldiers. He didn't expect this to happen, and he didn't want to believe it. Ji Tianxing looked at him indifferently and said indifferently, "You know nothing about the power of the Divine King realm." As soon as he finished speaking, the divine powers unleashed by Yank and the other two drowned the Imperial Army soldiers. The Imperial Army soldiers' expressions changed drastically as they used all their divine powers to block the attacks. But it was useless. Bang, 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 bang. Boom, 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 boom. A series of earth-shattering explosions rang out, shaking the surrounding tens of thousands of miles. The sea of lava within a few thousand miles was swept up by the destructive shockwaves, stirring up huge waves. Endless seven-colored divine flames surged out of the lava and filled the entire area. More than 20 Imperial Army soldiers were injured and killed by Yank and the other two on the spot. Gaps and openings appeared in the encirclement, and they were drowned by the seven-colored divine fire. Instantly, the Imperial Army soldiers were forced into a panic. Many of them were infected by the seven-colored divine fire. Their armor and divine weapons were burned out of shape, and their divine bodies were also burned until black smoke rose from them. Painful screams erupted from the crowd, rising and falling one after another. As a result, the area became extremely chaotic. Seeing that the Imperial Army had suffered heavy casualties, the Golden Dragon Emperor and the Imperial Advisor were shocked and quickly joined the battle. The two of them were about to join forces to attack Chao Qingyu and Lana when Ji Tianxing stopped them. Chapter 3380. Bam! Bam! Ji Tianxing brandished the Heavenpiercer sword and casually slashed out 2 sword lights, sending the Golden Dragon Emperor and the Imperial Advisor flying. The two of them tumbled hundreds of miles away and were almost forced out of the battlefield. Just as they were about to fall into the sea of lava, they steadied themselves and stopped in midair, still in shock. Their crowns and divine crowns were a little crooked, and their hair was a little messy. They looked a little haggard. It was only now that the two of them witnessed Ji Tianxing's terrifying strength. The Golden Dragon Emperor frowned and muttered with a gloomy expression, "A godly king is indeed powerful." The Grand Tutor's expression was also very ugly. He echoed, "I didn't expect him to be so calm and composed after fighting with 200 Imperial Army soldiers. It's as if he didn't fight at all. Not only is he still full of divine power, but he's also not injured at all." The Golden Dragon Emperor nodded and said dejectedly, "I underestimated the strength and methods of a godly king. I'm afraid that today's battle won't end well. I'm afraid that these 100 Imperial Army soldiers will also die here." I only hope that Master can arrive soon. Otherwise, my life will also be in danger. The Golden Dragon Emperor was arrogant and domineering, running amok in the Golden Dragon region. However, he wasn't stupid. He knew how to size up the situation. The battle had just begun, and the two sides had only exchanged a few blows, but the Imperial army had already lost a third of their forces. He and the Grand Tutor worked together, but they couldn't even block a casual strike from Ji Tianxing. He immediately understood that today's battle was doomed. They weren't a match for the four godly kings at all. Moreover, if the Golden Dragon region's ruler didn't arrive in time, he and the Grand Tutor wouldn't be able to escape. It was very likely that they would die under Ji Tianxing's sword. The Golden Dragon Emperor couldn't help but pray. At this moment, Ji Tianxing didn't chase after them. He was waving the burial of heaven and slaughtering the Imperial army soldiers wantonly. Although more than 60 surviving Imperial guards had formed a battle formation in the midst of the chaos, they were still unable to escape. However, Ji Tianxing and Yang's attacks were too ferocious. They came and went from east to west, making it impossible for the Imperial army to track them down. This made it difficult for the Imperial army to withstand, and a gap was quickly torn in the battle formation. Once a gap appeared, Ji Tianxing, Yang, and the others sped up their attacks. Before the Imperial army could try to repair the gap rapidly widened and became unstoppable. In just 100 breaths of time, the Imperial army's battle formation had crumbled. The remaining 50 or so Imperial guardsmen were also divided into 3 groups, each of which faced the fierce attacks of Ji Tianxing, Yang, and Cao Qingyu. They watched as the Imperial army soldiers were killed one after another, their bodies pulverized under the flashes of swords and sabers. The Golden Dragon Emperor and the Imperial advisors killing intent soared, and they roared as they charged into the battlefield. But this was of little use, nor could it prevent the Imperial army from being defeated. 15 minutes later, the great battle came to an end. Over 80 of the 100 Divine Lord Realm Imperial Guards were killed by Ji Tianxing and the others. The remaining dozen or so Imperial army soldiers were also covered in blood and heavily injured. The Golden Dragon Emperor and the Imperial advisor were also heavily injured. Their bodies were covered in blood, and their divine crowns were shattered. They looked extremely miserable. The Golden Dragon Emperor had expected to be defeated. However, he did not expect to be defeated so quickly and thoroughly. While he was shocked, he decisively ordered a retreat. Retreat! The Imperial advisor hurriedly waved his scepter and shouted, "Everyone, follow me and protect His Majesty as he retreat." Of the dozen or so surviving Imperial guards, half of them were captains of the Imperial Guards and quite a few of them were High Divine Lords. They were all extremely loyal to the Golden Dragon Emperor and immediately followed the Imperial advisor. Even if they had to sacrifice their lives, they had to buy time for the Golden Dragon Emperor and help him escape. Ji Tianxing and the other 3 chased after them at a leisurely pace, killing the surviving Imperial army soldiers one by one. After 100 breaths of time, they had chased for more than 30,000 miles. At this time, the dozen or so Imperial army soldiers were all killed. Not a single one was left. Only the Imperial advisor survived until the end. Even though one of his arms had been cut off and his scepter had been shattered, he still protected the Golden Dragon Emperor. Whoosh! Whoosh! As divine light flickered, Ji Tianxing flew in front of them and blocked their path. Yang, Cao Qingyu, and Lan Er followed closely and surrounded the Golden Dragon Emperor and the Imperial advisor. Their escape route was blocked from all directions. The 2 of them had nowhere to run and could only stop. "It's over." The Golden Dragon Emperor muttered silently, his heart filled with despair and indignation. "If I had known that there were 4 divine kings and that they were so powerful, I wouldn't have come personally. Even if I wanted to come, I should have endured it and come out with Master." At this moment, the Golden Dragon Emperor was filled with regret. He hated himself for being rash. If he could turn back time, he still wouldn't have let Ji Tianxing and the others go. However, he would have chosen to travel with the Golden Dragon region ruler. The Imperial advisor's scepter was gone. He held 2 blood-stained scimitars in both hands and glared at Ji Tianxing and Yang with hatred. "If you want to deal with His Majesty, you'll have to kill me first." Hearing this, Ji Tianxing raised his eyebrows and sneered. Ha ha. You're loyal to the Golden Dragon Emperor, and your courage is commendable. However, it's useless. Both of you will die. The Golden Dragon Emperor took a deep breath and forced himself to calm down. He tried his best to remain calm and said in a low voice, "Brat, I underestimated your strength and methods. I admit defeat. This matter ends here. I will let bygones be bygones and won't take revenge on you. How about it? I hope you don't go too far and don't kill me. After all, I am the Emperor of the Golden Dragon Empire and the region ruler's disciple. I believe that you have no enmity with the region ruler. You don't want to form a deep grudge with him because of this, right? Even though it was humiliating to take the initiative to ask for peace and would damage the Emperor's dignity. However, in order to survive, the Golden Dragon Emperor could only endure the humiliation and use an expedient plan. As long as he could survive, his face and revenge were not important. He believed that the other party was a foreign divine king. He would definitely be rational and calm. He would not be impulsive and really kill them all. He still had a chance to live. Unfortunately, Ji Tianxing directly destroyed his fantasy. Ha ha ha. It's too late to beg for mercy now. I gave you a chance to live, but you didn't cherish it and insisted on courting death. I can only fulfill your wish. After saying that, Ji Tianxing waved his hand. Yank, Chao Qingyu, and Lan understood. Without hesitation, they waved their weapons and slashed out destructive sword beams toward the Golden Dragon Emperor and the Imperial Advisor. The two of them were suppressed by an invisible divine aura. They could not move an inch and could not dodge. The two of them were about to be drowned by the sword beams and were about to be smashed into pieces. At this moment, a huge spatial rift suddenly appeared in the sky above everyone's heads. Catcher! An expanse of dazzling golden divine light burst out from the 5-kilometer-long spatial rift, and it poured down like a tempestuous wave. Bam! 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 The divine powers that Yank, Chao Qingyu, and Lan used were all blocked by the golden divine light. A dull sound exploded. The Golden Dragon Emperor and the Imperial Advisor had narrowly escaped death. They both revealed happy smiles. In the next moment, two figures, a man and a woman, appeared from the spatial rift and descended on the scene. Book Guest House Reading Website.